conditional formatting. Some of you might have noticed that. If I go in here and I say close, and what I want to do is add an eligibility slip, notice where I'm doing this from? From the touch tiles. I don't have to go any deeper. Eligibility add. What you'll notice is those fields that are required are in light red. Those are absolutely required. If you don't fill those out, you can't save it. Now, Linda or y'all can in fact say, okay, we also need, for example, for our sync funding to have these fields filled out, and you could in fact make other fields light up. It's not very difficult. I could tell Linda how to do it in 5 minutes. And so those are required fields. So I think we were talking about somebody who kept reusing the eligibility slip and not really saving it. This will show just the absolute minimum that you need to fill out to save the eligibility slip. And so if you fill this out, it minimizes the amount of information. Notice you don't, address I kind of say you need, but I'm lying. It's not absolutely necessary. But everything else, you'll notice there's, in the past we had asterisks next to everything, and address, there was a good reason for that in the past. So that'll show up many other places. Volunteer lawyer. Okay. There's a major change in what you can do with conditional formatting. Managing attorneys, please sit up and pay attention. You can see this is not completed. Escape, escape. I can say close. I'm out. That's because it was brand new. There is a search screen for private lawyers that demonstrates some stuff. Now, I apologize ahead of time because it doesn't show up well on this screen. But if we go here and we look at PBI lawyers and do show all, what you're going to notice, and again, it doesn't show up very well, but you'll notice here, any lawyer who is not currently on panel is grayed out. So if they get disbarred, they die, or both, you take them off panel by unchecking that, and it will gray out the list, that person's name. Does that make sense? Okay. The second thing that, this is what you can't see very well, is that all of the attorneys who don't have a case, this is really crazy, show up as a yellow bar. They're yellow. Now, for some reason, the projector here, we can't turn it down, but they'll be yellow. You'll see up here, there is an off panel, up here, key, it says, it's grayed out. And I can even say, show me all my off-panel attorneys, and you can actually see them here. See it? They're all grayed out. No ongoing case, if I do both here, no ongoing case will be in yellow. So if you're looking for an attorney who doesn't have a case that's current, so they're available, you can just pick the yellow attorneys. Now, why am I wasting everybody's time by telling her about this, okay? The reason is that this could in fact apply to y'all. If you have a particular need, for example, let's say you have a contract for veterans, helping veterans. You could very easily write in 2 seconds, not you, Linda, or Richard, a little piece of conditional formatting that says, for a person where it says veteran in the household, light up their case number in green. And by looking at your client search screen, all the veterans would be lit up in green. Or perhaps you could say, I want to see all my senior citizens. And you could have it so that when you opened up your search screen, all your senior citizens, the background of their case number or the whole row could be in light red. You could even do complex things. You could say, if a person is a senior citizen and they have a housing problem and they're in Orleans Parish, they should be funding code 7, and if they're not, light up their case number in red. So you could do all kinds of exotic stuff. You just have to ask for it to have it done. It's not very difficult. So you could do things that would directly affect your representation in your office by helping you see on the search screen at a glance certain things. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so, all right. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the ensuring quality. And how do we ensure quality of information in an intake? Well, there's a couple different ways. First off, demographic information is pretty much fixed and has fields such as age, race, address. I mean, we can't check to see if the client actually lives at that address. We don't do a sex check to see whether or not that person's had the correct gender entered for them. But we do know that there's a limited number of those, male, female, transgender, whatever, that have to be put in there. And so it's much more difficult or nigh impossible to fill out some fields with bad information now. Unfortunately, Linda isn't here. She showed some of the scars that she got from doing the conversion. We had, some offices had 2 million errors that we went through and cleaned up. And now it's going to be nearly impossible to do that because we've linked them together so it just won't let you put in bad stuff in a lot of the fields. Okay? And so if you said, oh, I used to be able to do that, well, there's a good reason why you can't now. It's because it's not, that value is just not allowed in there anymore. So that's one way we do it. We can check to make sure there is an entry in a particular field. So if there isn't an address and one is required, we can say, is there an intake there? But if we're dealing with a question, for example, of legal issues, that becomes much more difficult, doesn't it? I mean, you can't just have a checkbox or a yes, no, or something. Developing legal issues usually involves developing the facts, and those facts can vary all over the place. Agreed? And would it be helpful to have something that made sure that during your first interview, you got the information that was necessary? Or the intake person was able to get you the information? Would that be helpful to have? The answer to that is yes. Everybody should go, yes, that sounds like a great idea. Okay? All right, so we have 3 different ways of doing that. We're going to start with the most simple method, and then we're going to graduate up and look at the more complex method, okay? The first method is, how many people use canned notes? Good, just one person. Does anybody know what canned notes is? Okay, well let's go ahead and look at that. I think we need to explore this. A lot of times, I don't know if any of you have been involved in a situation where you have a type of problem that comes into your office and you're not used to dealing with that type of problem. You don't have a clue of what questions to ask. I know that wouldn't happen to most of you because you're probably well versed in every single aspect of poverty law. But it used to happen to me a lot. Or you're very experienced with doing interviews, but you've done 5 wills today, and you just can't remember whether or not you've asked this client or told this client something that you've told the 4 other people the same day. And so that's a really useful way of using canned notes. If I pick any client, let's do client search, and I'll say show all here. And what I do is I come in here and I'll take Robert McDonald, and that'll open up. I have the ability to go in here under case notes, and I'll say add a note. I can actually go in and discussion with client, and I can say I want to use a canned note. And let's say I gave them a will, or I talked to them about wills, about handwritten wills. I can click on this and say, okay, now I always say proper use of canned notes involves 4 steps. First off, what you've done is you've capped yourself. You've covered your arm with paper so you can record what you've done. So if you get sued, you can say, this is what I've told the client. I've recorded it, and the client just didn't remember it. Secondly, what you should do is use this as part of your exit interview. It's just a quick summary at the end. What you would do is you'd say to the client, and I told you about handwritten wills, I told you how the client, this isn't written in English, which is a problem. It'd be better if it was written in English. I told you the person couldn't be gorked out. I told you you had to have a witness there. I told you about how it affected joint checking. And that person might in fact say, you didn't tell me about joint checking. And you say, well, I'm sorry, this is the 5th will I've done today. let me tell you about how it affects joint checking. Will that increase the quality of your interview? Yeah. I mean, don't you want to provide the highest quality for the largest number of people? At least that's what my goal always was, to be the best law firm in town and to provide the highest quality. So you could then go in and say, let me explain it to you. The third thing that you should do is you should modify it slightly so the corporation knows you just didn't press it. So, here I'm going to say, told client to have son bring in the original will. And that means, hey, I just didn't press that button. I also gave it some custom stuff, and therefore I actually did use it. You see? The fourth step, you guys don't need it, because I know, tell me if I'm incorrect, but don't you guys all have, when your clients come in, they come in with a yellow pad with questions written down that they want to ask you, and when you tell them something, they write down what your advice is on that yellow pad, and if they have children, those children usually sit in the corner and play quietly during the interview. Is that typical? Yeah. Okay, I got some of it right. You have clients. That was about the only spot. Well, if that's the case, wouldn't it be cool if you could give them something in writing about the advice you gave them? Wouldn't that be nice? Let's do it. That's my fourth step. What you can do is if you go over here and you go to page 3 and you go to, where do I want to find it? To form letters here. I can click on form letters. It's not marked as safe. I can still do the letter. When I first started practice, our office had a client who had been killed by an abuser. And the office was kind of in shock, And I just started practicing law, and that always struck me as being, tragic. That's why we have safe here. So if you mark this, it basically means you've asked the client, can I get mail here? So if in fact, can I send you mail? You don't want an abuser opening up a letter saying, hey, your divorce is ready, let's get rid of this loser, That's not a good idea. So if I check that, when I go to page 3 and I say form letters, what you'll notice here is that I didn't get that message. Okay, I go choose a letter. Now, let's just see how many people were paying attention earlier. Kemp's first rule of survival is now this is case management, isn't it? You're all supposed to be here, right? You just didn't walk in off the street, did you? What's Kemp's first rule of survival? Read the screen. Excellent. Thank you. You're my man. Good. All right. But what's the second rule? If they're button, push it. Exactly. Very good. There are. You guys weren't paying. Well, I'm going to first choose a letter here. Okay. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say opening letter, staff opening. And lo and behold, there's a button there that says add text. Well, that's pretty cool. I would have actually said it differently, but I'm being recorded on camera. If I click add text here, look what I got. I got canned notes. Well, what if I click that and I say, let's go down to the advice I gave that client about wills. Where is that? Here's wills. And what if it was written in English, which it isn't, and I could modify it here so it's part of the letter. I'll say, I advised you about holographic wills, competency, nature the same, and I'm going to also tell them, I didn't have to use canned notes here. I could have in fact just typed something, and I am going to type something. I'm going to say, have your son Spike, I like that name, Spike, bring in the will. Imagine that. They say the likelihood of representation, successful representation increases almost tenfold if the client walks away with something in writing. And you know that about 95% of statistics are made up? but it does, including that statistic. But it does increase likelihood if you give them something in writing. So wouldn't it be cool if I could choose the sender who's gonna actually sign the letter? I'll have Terry Demand sign it. And if I can edit a full letter, I can edit anything I want in here. Because I know lawyers in Shreveport always include this very technical paragraph in their letters, which is yada, 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 okay? And they, if I'm not mistaken, don't you all also say, please don't give all important papers?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do is say, please don't give all important papers concerning your case. And so now when I generate the letter, what you're gonna notice is I can save the full letter in here. And what I also have is something that I'm not gonna tell you about except right now. You have the ability to actually save a PDF automatically of that letter in your document tracking by pressing the button up here. But I'm not gonna tell you that, because I don't have time. Anyway, you'll see here, this letter confirms, yada, yada, yada. Please don't give all important papers. Please be on time. I advise you about holographic wills competency. Have your son Spike bring in the will. Now, let me explain. You guys are clearly not straight on this. I play to the ooze in the office, in the room. And if I don't get ooze from y'all, I get cranky. And you don't want me cranky, okay? Now, I will accept a Louisiana substitute. Coastal California is dude. Interior of California is way cool. Alabama, dare I mention, is yeehaw. All right? So if you guys have a substitute, just let me know ahead of time, and I will accept, a substitute for food. All right? And remember, it's not so good if I have to ask. All right? Yeah, so you just have to do this spontaneously. So what you've got here is the client can in fact go home, they get a letter, they look at it and they go, geez, I didn't ask them about joint checking, or maybe that's when Sally stabbed Bobby in the arm with a pencil and I was distracted. I better call up and ask about joint checking, you see? So what you've done is 4 steps. 1, you've covered your arm with paper, so if you get sued, you're okay. Number 2, I'm being nice. And that's hard for me. Number 2, you've in fact reviewed it as part of your exit interview, so you've covered all the aspects. Number 3, you've added something slightly different to the form letter so that if the corporation looks at it, they know you just didn't push a button and then move on. And lastly, you've actually given a client something specific to give them advice. But that has nothing to do with what I was supposed to be talking about. So let's go and talk about one more aspect about canned notes. And that aspect is, close report here, do it twice and do close, is we were talking about quality of intake, right? Well, you have the ability here in case notes, when you add a new note here, and you say discussions with client, you should always label it. You now have canned questions that you can put in. That counted as a, that sounded like an ooh, a little bit. And it's close to it. All right, so if, for example, you want to do child support, you click here, and here's a list of questions that you can fill out for child support. All right, now this is the lowest level. There's a whole bunch of problems with this. You've got all of the questions, no matter whether or not they apply or if they don't. You can not necessarily fill them all out. You can, in fact, put garbage next to the answers, and you could delete things. Yeah, you can. There's all kinds of things. You can put in here just garbage, and it doesn't care because it's just a note. But it's the simplest one to put together. And you could go into all the questionnaires that are in there. Now, one caution, of course, is that the questions that are in there, I think, are Minnesota. And unless you've adopted the Minnesota code, you probably want to go in and make sure that it applies, the same questions would apply to Louisiana, okay? And so, but would this increase quality? Would it make sure that in that first intake you got the right thing? Would it mean that maybe if you're sending it over to the private attorney, you do a little bit of legwork for the attorney? Actually, this came from a pro bono program. They were kind of pre-screening and sending it to the attorneys so that some of the work would be done. So, that's the first step. First way of dealing with it. And then some of the things that I've said is that it's easy to use, easy to set up. It's already part of the notes. You can get, you can use it with both eligibility and clients. So you could do this from the eligibility slip exactly the same way. You could generate a letter, you could put the advice in the letter, but you can also put in the canned questions in there. Wouldn't that be helpful? I mean, to make sure you got everything taken care of. I would have loved that. It's not easy to report on because it's all mixed together, so if you needed to count the number of clients that had a certain type of answer, it'd be very difficult to do. It doesn't give you much direction. User gets all the questions, whether or not the questions apply or not. Answer's not validated, as you can see I put in just garbage here and it allowed it. Every client would get the same list of questions for a particular problem. That's kind of the bad part of that, but it's easy. And that means it's more likely to be used. All right, let's move up a notch. How many people use the interview system? Yeah, nobody. All right. Because it was adapted for your use in Louisiana. They went through and changed it and everything. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. If we go to page 2, there's an intake system here. That's the new one. The interview system is the old one. We're going to talk about this one last because it's wonderful. You'll go ooh like all the way home. Okay. If we just start edit interview, how would we pick out our list of questions? How would you group questions if you were looking for it? If you wanted to find a list of questions that would apply to your client, how would you group them so you could find them?
Problem code.
Good. Special problem code, national index code, or maybe even a custom list. Like you could have a list like receptionist questions or HIV questions or some other special list here. So let's go ahead and do a domestic violence interview here, since nobody's ever used this before. If I start a new interview here, one of the first things I've got to do is a client being interviewed the client, and is a person being interviewed the client? If I say no, I can put in who I'm interviewing and do a conflict check. Wouldn't be a good idea if it turned out to be the adverse party, would it? Nah. All right. If it is the client, I just say yes, and I'm ready to go. Now, one of the first things I said you needed to do, which is what? I needed to pick a list of questions. Yeah, and so I'm going to search by. So I'm going to search by problem code. Again, you guys can arrange these however you want to. What I'm going to do is go down, and a lot of people don't know. I don't know if you know, but problem codes are grouped according to their type of subject. So like 1 through 10, or 1 through 9 is consumer. 10 through 19 is education. 20 through 29 is employment. 30 through 39 is family law. 40s are juvenile. 50s are medical. Yeah, 60s are housing. 70s are public entitlements. 80s are individual rights, and 90s are miscellaneous. So if you didn't know that, it's real helpful when you're looking for something. So domestic violence would be in the 30s. There it is. And here are my questions. Unlike the new intake system we're going to be looking at, this one gives you all the questions at once. You can actually jump to the question automatically here. So you might click here and say, start the interview. Have you been physically abused? He broke my arm. Okay, I'll say store. I could put comments in here. I could say, I hate that. Client, I could say, that's just because the mouse keeps falling down. Let me just wedge it up here. Client is in cast and showed x-rays. So I could, I could add anything to the answer that I get here. So I could say store answer, move to the next one. How do you know the person who harmed or threatened you? I'll say he lives with, let me do this escape. See, I did the escape there. Or escape, actually, single escape. He lives with me. This is crazy because this mouse keeps moving. He lives with me. Bear with me. Store answer. Now I can skip. Have you called the police or sheriff? Are you absolutely sure you want to skip? Yep. No. Didn't. I'm just doing both hands. No.
How did you do that, Skip?
Just clicked on the one I wanted.
Yeah, just went down to
Which
No.
one? Oh, okay.
Didn't know I could. Now, the client didn't know they could call the police. Wouldn't it be nice if you could give them some advice about that?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you write questions to the interview?
Yeah, but you have to go in to build it. Yeah. It's just each one's a little different, the way you add things to it and stuff. But yes, you could. Or you can also write in notes here, and there's also a general note comment at the beginning and at the end that you could ask a custom question to. Okay. Okay. Wouldn't it be nice if I could press a button? Is there a button here? Let me see. Start an interview, conduct applicable advice. Where's my man who controls what I do? Rule 2.
No, press the button.
Press the button. There's a button here. So, applicable advice. Here it is. Look at this. Is battering a crime? Yes. No one has the right to touch or threaten or touch another person without a person's permission. A person found guilty, first time of an assault, battery against a family or household. This is Virginia law. May be sentenced for up to a year in jail. Would that be helpful to tell your client?
Yes.
Yes. Wouldn't it be cool if you could press a button and it would be stored as part of the interview?
Yes.
So if I clicked on save advice and I went back to conducting the interview, it is now part of my advice. All right. Now let's go down here and jump to another one. Okay. Do you have somewhere safe to go? Is that important?
Yeah.
Okay. So I click here, and it says, oh, I didn't store this one. I need to store it. That was what I didn't do. Let me do you have somewhere safe to go? Yeah, I want to skip. Okay, if I say yes, watch what happens. Nothing. Well, that's disappointing, but it isn't because we don't have to worry about it, do we? But what do you think happens if the answer is no? Well, you can put in a programmed response, and it tells the interviewer, give the client the phone number of the nearest shelter. The shelter phone numbers for branches is, for YWCA is, or Weave is this. And then you can say, what did you do? I complied with it, and you might even put in a note of what you did. You might say, I got the client a bed at branches, and it's a shelter I helped found in West Virginia. Branches and for her daughter.
Now, do we have this in our program?
Yes.
You say this is for
Yeah, you've had it for years. Yeah, you've got it. Yeah. All right, so I can save with prompt. Okay, and I'll store the answer. All right, now, I'm going to skip to the end here because you guys are getting the idea of it. I'm going to review the interview. This has all the answers. You can reorder the answers if you want, clean them up. What you can do is you can actually print them out. And when you print them out, here's a list of the questions, the client's answers, and you've got a place for the signature line of the client and a signature line of the interviewer.
So this is under the intake system?
Yes.
The client intake one, right?
Guys, I'm not hearing any oohs.
Ooh.
You know, if I have to ask, it's just not as good. You know? All right, now you also have an option in here of, if we close the print preview, is you can actually add it to your case notes. Even though it's stored elsewhere, reason has been added to the case notes. So, there, good. See, that was spontaneous. All right, so if we do close here, what we've now got is the ability to go into our case notes. Now, they're not going to be updated, and they won't show up, but one way of doing it is just hit Edit Notes, and you'll see it's in here. You got to understand that this is example data, and I have like notes in here from 2020 because I hate to keep changing the dates. So it's right here. You see this? Here's child support. Here's our interview right here. So if I do edit Zoom, what you'll see is here's the interview number. Ronald McDonald. He had been physically abused. He broke my arm. How do you know the person? He lives with me. Have you called the police? The answer, no, I didn't know I could. Response is, and we'll scroll down, is battering a crime? Yes, no one has the need. The next thing we said is, do you have somewhere safe to go? They said no, and you see here that we gave the client the phone number, and we also have comments. I got the client a place to stay. Will that increase quality?
Yes.
Will it help your clients?
Yeah.
What else is there? I mean, that's the two most important things. There are the answers to this can be yeses and nos, dollar amounts, letters, dates, texts, and numbers. So you don't just have a yes or no. You can put in a memo, you can put in a date, you can do other things like that. It's automatically stored in its own tables, and there's actually a search screen for it for the answers, so you could actually look at it. Disadvantages, all the clients get the same set of questions. For a problem, no change. Can't generate documents easily. Is more complicated to set up than the canned questions. Do you want to see the last one? This is the super duper one. We're just finished recently for Memphis, and Northern Virginia wants us to customize it, as does West Virginia, so that you could use it not only on the client intake, but you could actually use it as part of the eligibility slip. All right? To confuse things, we call it an intake system versus an interview system. So, let me explain kind of generally, that's a piece of ice, generally how it works. And that is that, like TurboTax, you only get one question at a time. Also, if you answer a question a certain way, do you have children? It's going to send you, if you say no, it's going to send you off to the next question. If you say yes, it's going to ask you about that child. All right? And then it'll ask, do you have any more children? If you say yes, it'll start asking you about the second child. If you say no, it'll send you off on the interview to continue. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can have a list of values. So let's say your parishes have different laws dealing with the implied warranty of habitability. How safe does an apartment have to be? Let's say it's done on a parish level in Louisiana. You can have a list of different parishes, and if you clicked on one parish, it might advise them that during the interview, it might say, are you aware that there is an implied warranty in New Orleans Parish, and the landlord is supposed to provide you with heat, hot water, and a weatherproof environment. Whereas if you did it in another parish, it might say there is no implied warranty in this parish. You see, so you can do lists of things. So you can do all kinds of really exotic things in the system. And let's go ahead and take a look at it. We're going to use airship property as a test. Here we're going to talk about air checking here a little bit. But I didn't want to do funding code, actually. I want to do intake system. So if we go to the intake system, it says that there actually is one interview on this case already. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in fact, do a new interview. And since this is a button,
Push it.
I'm waiting for my button guy.
Push the button.
Thank you. Man, I'm not going to, I'm dependent upon your advice on this. All right, we do new interview. Obviously, who's doing the interview? Here's, again, our set of questions, right? How do you group them? They can be custom list, they can be problem code, national index, special problem code. Everybody know what a special problem code is? I'm going to assume that the volunteer lawyer person doesn't, although she might. Oh, good, excellent. Special problem code is underneath the problem code, and it allows you to take the main problem code and divide it up into 100 subdivisions. And the advantage of that is if you attach a question to a problem code, you only get one list of questions. And for example, an eviction, landlord-tenant. Well, landlord-tenant could be an eviction, it could be needed repairs, it could be a lockout, it could be a whole bunch of stuff. And to try to do a list of questions for all those possibilities is much more difficult than to be able to go into the special problem code and pick lockout, and then you have a list of questions that are the questions you have to ask about lockout. Are you behind in your rent? How much are you behind? How long have you been? Have you received any notices? Do you have any medicine in there? Do you have any baby stuff that's not, the types of, it's much easier to, when you're dealing with a narrower issue, to do a list of questions than it is to deal with a broad issue. Here I'm going to do a custom list, and I'm going to pick an airship property. Okay, so I'm going to pick airship. Now, begin comment about the interview. I could say client is very distraught, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the correct answers or whatever. Here, same question: is it the client or somebody else? I'll say it is the client, and I'll start the interview. Notice how there's only, it's kind of TurboTax-ish, where there's only one question on the screen at a time. Is the property in Tennessee? If I say no, the interview ends. Okay, and we'll look at that later. I'm going to say yes, and notice I have a possibility of putting in a comment here. I'll say save next question. Did your parents leave a will? If I say yes, it ends, because if there's a will, it has to be probated, and the property has to be dealt with. I'll say no. Save next question. Is there a mortgage? If I say yes, there is a mortgage, the interview ends, because if there's a mortgage, and it can in fact provide a paragraph that says, if there is a mortgage, you can put it in the document. If there is a mortgage, this has to be, the bank has to be party of what's going on here before the property. So I'll say no, there is no mortgage. Save next question. Is there a person not related who can testify? Yes. If I say no, then we're not in good shape. Save next. Can that same person who's not related also verify? Look at the prompt down there. Surviving errors. It explains for the interviewer and for the client what an error is. It says that an heir can be a surviving spouse, children of the deceased. Is the same, let's say they can say yes. Save next question. Can the same person testify whether or not there's a will? We'll say yes. Save next question. Testify whether state's debts have been paid? Yes. Save next question. Now, look at what happens here. You now have advice to give the client based upon all of those correct answers. You've kind of gotten to the end, where now you can go through and say, based on what you've told me, we advise that you fill out a form called Affidavit of Heirs. It will be need to fill out by somebody who's not a relative, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you'll see, click on the question tab to proceed. Did you provide the client with the advice? Well, hopefully, since it was put in your nose that you did give them the advice. So we're going to say yes, we did provide that advice. I could do comments. I'll save next question. Your interview is over. Do you have any questions for me? Nah. And then I'll say save next question. And here's a summary of the interview. We could print it out like we could before with a signature line. You see it right here. What we can also do is we can in fact send it to our case notes, and it's been added to the case notes. But what's more important is we can generate documents based upon it. So if I click here and I generate a letter here, open letter to the client, I'm going to say I want to send it, Clarence Darrow's going to send it, and I'm going to use the main letterhead, and I'm going to generate the letter. Here it is. Dear Mr. McDonald, you told us certain things during the interview. The property in question is in Tennessee. You indicated your parents did not leave a will. You told us there was not a mortgage. You told us that there's a person, et cetera, et cetera. This is just hacked out. You could have had it say anything that you wanted on Now, each person's interview could be different based upon the answers they gave. You know, it might branch out into the list of children. It might branch out to ask something more in another area, whereas a client who didn't have that same question or that same answer would go a different path. So it's specific. Let's take a look at an interview that fails, okay? Or an intake that fails. What I'm going to do is go in here. I'm going to say close. Now I'm going to say, let's go to new interview. I'm going to do, what I want to do is I'm going to do a custom list, because you're already experts on airship property. Go to airship here. I'm going to be, is the person being interviewed, is the client? Yes. And I'm going to start the interview. Is the property in Tennessee? No. Save, next question. Did you offer the caller informational materials and refer to a private bar? I'll say yes. Okay, save, next question. That's all that's there. I'm done with the interview. Should I generate a letter to him? Let's generate a letter to him. Generate a document, open letter, choose a sender, choose a letterhead, generate the letter. Dear Mr. McDonald, you told us during the interview that the property is not located in Tennessee. Since our representation is limited to Tennessee, we recommend you contact the legal aid program in the state where the property is. I think that qualified as new. All right. But I didn't hear it anywhere else. All right, so what we've done is we've taken a look at 3 different levels of assistance with getting quality intake done and getting the correct answers that you need to do an interview. Each one's a little more difficult to set up, but each one has benefits. Did you like the fact that the documents that were generated were specific to the problem? That was pretty cool, wasn't it? Was it nice that it blew you out of the interview right away if the answer failed the interview? That was cool. You didn't have to waste time, right? We didn't look. You can generate pleadings with this. You can generate basically any kind of form that you want, an interview summary or whatever. All of those things can increase quality, quantity of your representation, and even if you have a new trainee, if she or he learns how to use those choices, you can make sure they do a decent first interview, and during case acceptance, if you do that, you don't have to have the interviewer say, go call the client and ask for some additional information. Yeah?
Does Linda have to put in all of the questions?
Linda, I can't remember who was sitting here from Southern, but it's part of the committee job.
The statewide committee?
Statewide committee to get together and populate these. It's not just Linda. Linda could put them in, but it has to be coordinated, because if you've ever let something like this open and let people get to it,
Well, that's
yeah.
what I'm wondering.
Yeah, no, it's under admin. And actually, let me show it to you just to give you an idea. You can't get into it, but if you go to admin here, do you see right here it says intake system? If you click here, there's a whole set of utilities we'll be covering tomorrow about how to set up the questions, how to set up the documents, how to set up, what happens, and set up lists of questions. So all of those things, there's a utility program for that. There's a utility program for the advice, and there's a utility program for the intake system I just showed you. There's a utility program for the interview system I showed you before that. And if in fact what you wanted to do is add canned questions, what you would do is it's much simpler. You go here, you go to set up tables. You'd have to be an administrator to do this. You go to, I believe, it should be multi-canned notes. Canned notes to lawyers. If you're the admin, you can do canned notes to lawyers. I sent this new lawyer a packet of materials informing them of how to use the online PBI portal. I gave them, ways of getting cases. I told them how often we'll call. Whatever you tell, you could put that into canned note.
So wait a minute, Linda would have to do it for everybody, or can admins for different programs.
I don't exactly know on canned notes who has rights and who doesn't, okay? But if, in some of the programs, if you're an admin, you can get in and do it. And if you're just, how many people are in your office, just you?
We're a total of 5.
Oh, 5, you're big, okay. Are you new owners pro bono?
But I'm the only one that doesn't.
Okay, well, see, right here, multi-can notes, right here. If I double click, here's the way it's put in. You could copy and paste from Word if you wanted to. If I go down here to a list of questions, here's bankruptcy question. You just go in there and type in what you want. And that's the easiest way. That's the canned questions. All right. I see some yawning, some tiredness. Let's take a break. If you guys were in a Bruce Springsteen concert, you could go backstage and stick your head in a bucket of water to wake up. All right, let's take a break. Questions I got over break was how to do certain things, and a lot of people are not aware that there is built-in help because I've hidden it underneath the title help. And you know, most people would rather die than press the help button. So if we go to help, there's several things. One is there's an advocate's guide. Advocate's guide is about a 5-page summary of how to use the system. It's pretty simple. It goes through and it basically just tells you the basics about using Prime. And that's a good introduction. Besides that, what you've got is also, you've got under help, is you've got a knowledge base. And that has about 237 different tips inside of it. Not all of them are greatly up to date because I spent my time rewriting the manual, which is 315 pages long with 400 screenshots, and it's got 15 addendums to it. So that was a real chore. So that's available online. You can get to that also online to look at the full manual. But this is kind of convenient because I had a question about, what's your name?
Jesse George.
Jesse. Asked about how do I change the letterhead. Well, all we did is we went in here and we typed in letterhead. And what happens is you can search for it different ways. This search is for the keyword in the topic. And what I mean by that is each of these has a topic. And in this case, there was one actually called letterhead. So when we double clicked on it, it opened up this suggestion box that goes through and tells you where to find it, how to use it, why it's important, and how to do it. If we go in here and we look, let's say we want to know how to use the calendar. One of the things we can do is type in here calendar. And when we hit enter, here's a bunch of topics having to do with calendar. If we double click on calendaring, it tells you, let me double click on it. It tells you why it's important, where do you find it, and how do you use it. And so you can go through and look at that. If it doesn't give you what you need, you can look for the keyword in the text. And this will give you every one of the 237 tips that mention the word calendar. And you can see there's a lot larger number of hits that are in here than just the 3 that we had before, such as sending letters, single, bulk, and scheduled. So you could double click on that and it'll kind of explain how to do that. And then lastly, you can just kind of browse an area such as, well, I want to know something about, maybe searches and reports. And if I click here, then it gives me a whole bunch of things that deal with searches and reports. Also, there's a user group. It's free to join online. It's in here. And we also have a website. For those of you who will be using the PBI portal, which is where the private attorneys can go in and sign up, pick cases, download and upload documents, and do all those things, you can go in there and there's some videos that actually show you how it works, and they're narrated by James. And so you get an idea of how it works. And so, in addition to that, there are a lot of help buttons around the system when you're in there. Just keep your eyes open. Doug, my button man, is he in the back there? Yeah, there you go. My button man would say, if there's a help button, what do you do, Doug? Click it. That's right. All right. So what we want to do now is we want to continue kind of on our quest here. And we've done timekeeping. And what I want to switch over to next is, oh, I wanted to explain that you're used to timekeeping, or used to search screens. And one question that always comes up with time is, I've put in the wrong time, what should I do? Okay, and we had a discussion, and in the past I've told people to go in and edit the time slip, put 0 and put error on the text page, on the note page. Now, somebody told me, I think from maybe it was New Orleans, who said you get an error next day if you do that. So what she says you do is you just hijack that, put today's date in it, and use it for something you do right now. We don't allow people to delete things. I hope you'll understand, for obvious reasons. Oops, or the managing attorney who says, I wonder what this does. I was one of those, so I understand. And so we generally, it's not easy to delete things. So hijacking and just reusing an incorrect time record, changing the date, and using it for a current time record might be your best bet. I didn't realize that we would have gotten an error message for 0, but that must have been an error check that we put in. What I was going to talk about, though, was search screens. And the calendar search screen has a magical feature to it. And that magical feature is it actually allows you to edit. And most people are not aware of that. So if I want to go in here and I want to change this from 5/5/2018 to, let's say, 5/6/2018, and you are going to see an error, and the error is intentional. So I'm going to say 5/20/18, and I click here. I'm getting an error. The reason for that is that you have to have a ending date that's the same or after the beginning date. So if I'm going to change a date, I'm going to have to change both of these dates. Now I could put this to 20, or I could put it to 22, and that would take care of our problem, because they would in fact be the same or later. So let me do 20 here and do backspace, and you notice I clicked off of it, I'm fine. Now, if I go in here and I do that again, just to help you with the blah, 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 if I do 22 here and click, what you'll see here is blah, 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 start date and time must be before ending date and time, blah, 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 okay? And so if you just look at those key things, it's telling you that your start date is after your ending date, and that just doesn't make any sense. You also have to have in the calendar, you have to have a reason. You have to save a reason. You have to have start time, end time, start date, end date. That's because when we sync with Office 365, it has to have those values, or it just doesn't work. And so we had to put those in and kind of enforce them. And if we don't, then we get into problems. So that's a little bit different than in the past. You have to put a little bit more in. But one of the things that I wanted to stress here was that you can edit some things from the calendar to make managing your calendar easier. I just hit escape twice to undo it. Okay, so now I can move off of it with no problem. See? But anyway, so you can edit some of the things. You can't obviously change the client name. That would be a little too intense. But you can do things like change the staff number, the reason, whether or not it's a tickle, etc. So you can manage pretty quickly from a screen like this. Yellow.
In this and in time, and I don't know what other search screen button, since we no longer can right click, you can't see that hidden text. So that was how you used to be able to see the hidden text in that column. So what do?
Hidden text where?
Well, see how there's more text than there is.
Well, you can scroll with the arrow key. The problem that I have is that that's the runtime version of Access, which you don't get charged for, and that's why you can't right-click. We didn't have any control over that. Microsoft does that, because otherwise nobody would buy Microsoft Access. They just use the free version. And so the free version doesn't allow the right-clicking. Now, we
just
could...
all of a sudden did that out of the blue?
No, because you're using the full version when you were running it locally.
No.
But you're running the runtime version. Now, we could program something in there that would allow you to blow that up. In other words, it would allow you to open it up in a particular window, if that was something that was necessary to be done, but we'd have to put it in. You know,
That's
nobody's
what it
ever
used to be.
said anything to us about it before, that was a problem.
Bring up a little separate window that would allow.
Well, there's also a way to do it here. Yeah, you could do it that way, but you can also just double click on it, and what that will do is open up here, and you can just change it there, save it, and then just say close, and you're back.
Yeah, but.
I mean, that's one additional step, but depends how much editing you're doing. Yeah. So you can edit here. That's a difference. But there's also additional 2 search screens that you should be aware of in Calendar. One of which, if you go to search here and you go to scheduling, you can do the calendar view search. Now what this does is it will light up every day on which there's something scheduled. And if you click on that day, it will actually show you the things that are scheduled. Now, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, you just want to see your stuff. What you could do is put in your advocate number here, and it would then limit what's lit up in red only to your schedule. Or if you're a managing attorney and you want to see what's scheduled just in your office, you could change this to just your office, and then it would light up in red only those things that were in your office. Or you could limit it to a particular person in a particular office. Yeah?
But can I limit who can see my
No.
stuff? Okay.
No, no. I mean, we've done that before with views and stuff, but by and large, people, nobody really implements that because it's more of an idea of sharing. And there's a trade-off for both ways. Some people want everything they do to be secret, and they don't want other people to see it. In the other office, they want to find out when the managing attorney comes in the morning and they see they're looking at the calendar for the day, they see you've got something scheduled and you're missing an action. We've had tales about managing attorneys who've been able to get continuances in court and stuff because they were able to see that somebody has something scheduled and their car had broken down and they hadn't heard from them. And so they were able to save things. So, it can be done. It can be done with views. We have done it in the past.
It's
But
more an issue of confidentiality.
I understand.
Because doing sync work is mostly juveniles.
Right. Well, that could be done with views. I mean, you can go in, but it has to be set up to do it that way. Yeah, yeah. And it's a question of sharing, not sharing. But yeah, you can do it that way. We've done it. Okay, so there's this, and also if you're running the home screen, you saw on how when you brought up, if I go to view here, you saw when I brought it up and I did the today screen, you saw how in the today screen I have the calendar here that I run it. I can look at any of these other types. If I use a different startup screen, which is the home screen, if I go to view here, I can bring that up simultaneously. The home screen also has in it kind of that light up here where you can click and see what's scheduling or scheduled or not scheduled here, and that can also work for you. If you double click here, we'll actually open up the case or the calendar and allow you to go in and modify it. So I wanted to mention that there were those additional search screens that were available and that I thought you'd be interested in seeing. I think what we want to do now, and I want to make sure that I've got my beginning here, is we're going to be talking about, we've talked about timekeeping and calendar. What I want to do now is switch over to compliance, error checking, and litigation outcomes, conflicts, and eligibility. First off, let's talk about Llc compliance. One of the things I was really surprised in, well, I'll get to that in a minute. A lot of the compliance that you have to do for the Legal Services Corporation is taken care of on the eligibility slip. What you've got is you've got the problem code, making sure you handle the correct problem code. If you look at the problem code, you can say, is it within our priorities? You've got the asset amounts set by the board, you've got income, you've got over income, you've got the extended eligibility. I showed if you pick extended eligibility, it will pop up that custom form that you have to check off to make sure that it complies with the extended eligibility exceptions. So all of those things help you comply. You've got the citizenship check in there. We had some problems. We wrote an error check that said if you had C, it threw an error, which was an ineligible alien, okay? Or it may have been an undocumented. I can't remember the exact terminology. We now created a U. You should never have a C checked because C is an ineligible alien. I mean, they're ineligible. But there is a U now, which is a undocumented eligible or something, and that can help you out. And that could fall under, for example, you're under a special grant where you can help, people who are undocumented and all those things. You can use the U feature in there. Okay, let's talk about also, how many people use the Llc audit or compliance sheet? That's what happened the other day. A lot of people just didn't even know it existed. Do you guys like fairy tales with happy endings?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Once upon a time, there was a program in California, and Legal Services Corporation was sending 5 people in to edit and to audit it. They were supposed to be there for 2 weeks. They came in, they looked over their files, they said, there's nothing for us to look at here, you've got it all in order, and they went back to Washington a week early. Now that's a happy ending, and they got a nice write-up. And that's a happy ending if I've seen it, because they meant you didn't have to deal with those, I won't say anything, those people for 5 days. The way they did it is they utilized the LSC audit or compliance form that's built into the intake sheet that a lot of people are not aware exists. So let's take a look at that. What I'm going to do is go to my open cases here. Incidentally, are people aware of speed time and speed notes? Yes? No? Oh, we need to look at that real quick. This is the fastest, quickest way you can put in time in the system. And it is that way. We designed it for a high volume consumer practice in San Diego. If you go to the Today screen and you say, I need to put in time on one of my cases, you can go to your open cases here. You can go down, let's say, to Gracie de los Santos, speed time and speed notes here. You can say I spent 2 hours. The casework that I did was discovery, and I did ROGs. I'll just say did ROGs, interrogatories. It defaults to sending it to your case notes when you do save time. It's now gone in there, and it's also gone into your notes here, and this is your complete notes. And if what you want to do is if you want to add a note, you can just say, I'll say Jim looked at the case today. Jim looked at the case today. How did I do? I'm hitting all the wrong keys here, obviously. Let me do here. I'll type it again. Just screw it away. Jim looked at. I keep hitting the touch thing here because it's on an angle. At the case today. Okay. Now, if I just say save note, it becomes part of the notes right here. See, Jim looked at the case today. That's the fastest way you can get things in. One of the differences also in the system, has anybody run into a situation where you ran out of space for your notes and it ended up spewing out so that you ended up having to look at it in terms of edit? If you've had that happen, it shouldn't happen unless you exceed something like 296,000 characters, and we can bump it out further if you need to. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick here. If I go into my open cases and I go down and I look at Paula Lewis, she has like 275,000 characters. What it does now is, what it will do is it will in fact put in tabs for you. So if I open up Paula Lewis, you could read her notes here, but you notice that there's an incredible number of notes. So if we go in here and we scroll through them, this is just the first page. What it does is it breaks it down into 4 separate pages. As you can see, I'm looking at the second group of notes, and you can read through one and hit page 2 and go to 2. That shows up on the client intake. That shows up also on the search screen if you want to read notes from the search screen. I'm not sure if people know you can do that, but there is a button that allows you to read the search screen. So I would highly recommend that if you want to put in time or notes extremely quickly on your open cases, this is a great place to do it. You just go to the open case, click, and pick speed, time, and note. You can put in a calendar, full calendar, or full timesheet if you want to do it there instead. But this also allows you to read the notes. I'm glad I kind of ran into that. Okay, what were we doing before I got sidetracked on that. Oh, we were talking about looking at the compliance sheet. So if we open up Paula Lewis, which she has the enormous number of notes, what we'll see is we'll also see if we go to notes here to read them, you'll see that it has the multiple tabs here also, allows you to skip through them. But the reason I'm here is I want to show you on page 3, what we have is the Llc Compliance Sheet, which I'm surprised you all just don't know about. If you click on here, what you can do is say, is there an eligibility sheet? Is there a signed retainer? What's the date of the retainer? What's the staff number of the person who filled this out? Is there a closing memo? Is there written evidence of representation? Is there a signed citizenship agreement? Is there a case within priorities where they told of the grievance procedure? You can go to page 2. Is there a litigation? If there's litigation, are these things in place? And page 3. And when you're done, you just print it out. And that's what they had done with all of their cases. They had printed it out and had it when they opened up a closed case. There was a summary of all the things that needed to be done. They went through each of the cases that they picked, and it had all of the documents necessary to be filled out in there. So that's why they left early. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Y'all changed, I think it was called,
It was called LC Audit.
Closing checklist
Yeah.
before, previously.
I think somebody renamed it. We had an LC
Yeah,
audit.
it was case closing checklist, so I think, cause I've used it, but it wasn't called the
Right.
compliance
LC
sheet.
Compliance, yeah.
It wasn't called that.
Yeah.
Right.
Now this can of course be edited by Linda and Richard if you needed to add any additional things. Let's say you're funding through sync or something, required some pieces of information that you needed to have done. You could certainly add those in here and have it printed out, yeah.
Can you show, and it may be out of order, but we were talking about, putting up this closing data from the search screen, where you can look at the closing data for each case without opening up each.
Yeah, that one.
Are you talking about case notes? Yeah.
Case notes.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. Here, I'll show it to you real quick.
Yeah.
So if I do close here, and I do close, and I do close, what I'm going to do is go to a search screen. I can look at notes there. So if I do close here, I clicked off of it. Let's do end here, and let's do close. And what I want to do is search. I want to do you have not. I'll see it screwed me up because I did that. All right, let me just do this 1000 tab XXX. That's good. All right. So if I go to client search, I should have done that directly. If I go here and I say show all and I want to look at notes, I can just single click here and I can click on notes, and there are the notes on the case.
So it's not
When you
reading
close
notes, it
it,
just says
show the
notes.
other, buttons.
Well, there are a series of buttons. So you're talking about this closing summary? Oh, okay. How many people are managing attorneys in the office? Are you here right now? Okay, and do you guys review the cases before they're closed?
Yes.
Yeah, and you should do it, but you're about 6 months behind. I was a managing attorney twice. Come on. Come on, fess up. Wouldn't it be cool that if you were going to, let's say you get an email from somebody saying that Teresa Sarr needs to be closed. Well, you could go to the search screen. You don't have to look for the paper file. What you can do is you can go to the closing information here. It gives you a summary of the case. It shows you all the information about the eligibility sheet. It gives you that she's at 328% of the poverty level. You got a problem. You may not want to say this one's ready to be closed. You can actually go to page 2. You can look at any case notes. You can check the funding code if that's been activated. You can review case notes. You can look at all this information. Now, do you see this reviewed here? If you click this and say it's reviewed, it actually changes it on the client record itself. And so what I can now do is print this out, and it can be put into the record to be closed. And you could send an email back or whatever saying, hey, yeah, we're ready, it's ready to be closed. If that person now goes in to, let's do close here, if they now go into Teresa Sarr and open up that intake, what they'll see is if they go to the closure information, what you'll see is that it's been reviewed and okayed for closure. Okay? So that's a lot faster than having to search around and find all the paper and do all of that, assuming that the information that's in here. That would allow you to go through a list pretty quickly of looking at what's going on. And so, is that what you wanted to see? I assume that's what you wanted to see. Good. Okay, so that's how you can go in. Now, we looked at the LC audit, we talked about that. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about a couple other things that were on the checklist that people, our survey about what people were interested in. You know that you have to report affirmative litigation that you do. And so one of the ways that you can do that is if we go to page 3 here and you go to Litigation Court, this allows you to put in a list of courts, up to 3 of them, a filing date, a docket numbering, ending date, the parties to the case, whether or not you're the petitioner, plaintiff, or the respondent. If it's a protected case, that means you don't have to reveal the address of your client, and there's a report that'll print out without the address for protected cases. And then what you have the ability to do is that if this went up to another court, generally the corporation says that if you go to an appeal, you can open up a separate case and count it as a separate case. But if you wanted to add another court in here, I could click here, and I could, if your judges were in here, I could choose a judge. If you don't have judges, you can just choose the court. I'm going to choose a judge. I'll go in here and I'll pick Justine Olaf, and as you can see, it filled all this out for me. I could put in a docket. I could put the date it was filed, the date the case ended. I could put the results for that action in here. And so that's the litigation screen that's available if you want to use it. It will then generate the Burton report, which is the one that shows you where if you ran it against only cases where the client was a petitioner, you would get out the list of reports of the petitioners, affirmative litigation that you did. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? I'm trying to slow down talking. I found that I had been increasing my speed, so trying to play it at 33 rather than 45. So. Okay, outcomes. That was another thing that people were interested in. In the past, you had a single main benefit. Now, the reason it's called outcomes is because I got tired of fighting with the corporation. They decide they want to change the name because they want to change the name. And I just said, fine, I'm not going to argue with them, I'll just do it. So there is no longer a field called outcome on the intake sheet. In the past, there was a field called outcome. It is now there, except it's called case result. It's exactly the same information as before. So if I go in here and I go under closure, you see case result, and that's one lost, mixed result, not applied. And that was called outcome before. I didn't want to have outcome and outcomes. And so I just changed it to be named case results. So it's still there. I had that question yesterday. Outcomes are the same now as your economic benefits that you had in the past. You get to it just by going to a tab here. There is a really nice feature. You don't have all that many outcomes, but if you did, a corporation, to give you an idea of how crazy the corporation is, they come out with a suggested list of outcomes for cases, and they don't have outcomes for a lot of the problem codes, their own problem codes. So you can't put in an outcome for a particular problem code because none of the outcomes they list apply to it. I took their list and went through and found the problem because they didn't have outcomes for and added some in. But you don't have that list, you have your old one. Now, how do I find things? There are 3 ways to attach an outcome to a case. And this is a priority question or a policy question. Number 1 is you could say that no matter what, I can put any outcome on a case irrespective of the type of case. I actually favor that method. So for example, if you were closing a case, it was a landlord-tenant case, one of your outcomes might have been kept the family together. If they had been evicted, they wouldn't have been able to find a place to stay. They would have had to go to different places, and that would have broken the family apart. Now that normally is not something you would think of as being a housing outcome. It would more than likely be a family outcome, but you can see how it might apply. You guys following me so far? So the second method is that you could limit the outcomes to a range of outcomes. Anybody tell me what the range of housing problem codes are?
60 to...
Yeah, 60 to 69. And so therefore, if you had a housing case, it would allow you to choose from any of the 60 out, problem code 60 outcomes, and that would be a little bit broader. The last method you could use is you could say, we won't allow you to choose any outcomes except those that fall under your own problem code. Okay, so those are the kind of the three methods that you can do. Does everybody understand that? I don't know which way they enforce it with y'all. Yeah.
I had a question about it. I don't know if you want to finish with that, but I just had a question about the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to get to it in just a
Oh,
minute.
okay.
I might end up answering.
Okay, sure.
And if not, please write
Yeah,
down your note
Yeah.
so you remember. Now, in reporting outcomes, there's two methods of doing it, and both of them are kind of confusing because they show different things. One is you could say, show me all my outcomes by outcome. So kept family together, you might have 20 of them. Prevented eviction, you might have 5. You might have prevented illegal grabbing of property under a consumer case. You might have 10 of those. The second way of reporting it would be you report those outcomes, but under each problem code. So you might have kept family together 5 times under problem code 63, landlord-tenant, but then you might have kept family together 10 times underneath one of the family problem codes. You see? And it's really a different way of looking at things if you look at it based upon what type of problem are you solving for the client versus just a listing of how many benefits you got, irrespective of the type of case you got it under. And both of those have value. I don't want to belittle one or the other, but those are distinct ways of looking at things. Okay? Now, how do you find things? Well, there's a button here. Doug? He's just toying with our emotions. If we pick find here, what it does is it lists all of your outcomes. But that's not the advantage here because that's just a pull down. What you can do is you can say, let's say I had a case where there was dealt with custody. What do you think the key word I should type in is? Custody. So if I type in custody, what it will do is it will bring up a list of all of my outcomes that mention the word custody, which makes finding the outcome easier for you, or should. Okay? However, if you don't find it that way, you can obviously try other words, or you can say, I want to find all of the outcomes under problem code 63, let's say. Notice here, this is problem code 31, problem code 37, and problem code 41, so it kind of spans all different ones. If I type in 63 here and hit enter, it shows me all of the outcomes that I've got set up under problem code 63, landlord-tenant. So it gives you a couple different ways to go through a list of outcomes to find one that you think is appropriate. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Now, if we start looking at what actually is gathered, which hopefully answer your question that you had, what we've got is, first off, we've got the outcome here. Actually, from that search screen, you can push a button, and if you're on a blank outcome, it will move that number in for you. It won't do it over the top of an existing one for obvious reasons. You don't want that to happen by mistake. But so here what we're doing is we're keeping track, one, of lump sum. I got $40,000 worth of back benefits for my client. Okay, I got somehow a damage payment when we counterclaimed for, we got $1,000 or something. Number 2, monthly worth. I got $235 worth of child support payments per month for my client. You could do that times the number of months if you wanted. So you might say 18 years of age times 12, number of months, and that'll automatically multiply out down here to give you a total lump sum for monthly worth and number of months. Avoidance is basically exactly the same thing, except it's the flip side. I was sued for an auto accident for $6,000. You guys showed that I wasn't responsible, therefore I avoided having to pay $6,000. Monthly avoidance, there was a claim that I was a parent of a child. It was shown that I wasn't the parent of the child. I was being sued for $400 a month for child support. So I could say I avoided $400 a month child support times the number of months, which might be 18 times 12 if I had to pay for all 18 years, however you want to do it. that would give me a lump sum. Now, there are certain things in life, or certain things, I should say, in practice of law, where you're not going to be giving the client money or avoiding money being taken away, but you're still rendering a service to the client. And those are things like deeds and wills and things like that. So I put in a field there that you could put a value in there. You might just use kind of the going rate in town. So if you talk to the bar and you find out, well, most people charge about $750 for an uncontested divorce, you could, if you did an uncontested divorce, you could go in there and say, the value of that is about $750. And if people charge, $400 for a will, you put $400, in there for a will, and that way you're not kind of losing track of some value things that you've done. That now, whether or not there's a policy you use that or not, it's up to you. And if it's not being used, we probably make it invisible. There's some notes in there, a place to scribble in some notes. And there's also some hidden fields in there. And the hidden fields, there's a place for client input. It's a pull down where you could say like client agreed, disagreed with the outcome or whatever if you wanted to do that. You could use it for something else if you wanted to. You could also keep track. It already actually shows in here adults and children. One of the things that is another reporting problem with outcomes, let's say that I've gotten 3 outcomes. I kept the family together, I prevented an eviction, and I got the utilities turned back on. And the family was a family of 5. Well, I could say under benefits for kept family together, I helped 5 people. For getting utilities turned on, I helped 5 people. And for preventing eviction, I helped 5 people. So it looks like there were 15 people that were helped, but they actually were 15 people who were helped with each as, it was 5, 5, and 5. So it's not, as long as it's clear, you're not misrepresenting anything. I also have a report in there that will count the unique people that were helped. And so if you ran that report, it would say in this period you helped 5 people, you see. So you could say I helped 5 people, but I helped 5 people with keeping the family together, 5 people, when you're looking at it that way. Did I answer any?
Oh, no, the question I had, maybe you answered it before I walked in, but on this screen, I've been confused about why the top one says the opening date and then the bottom one says the closing date. Do you see where it says that under date?
I've got date here,
What was that?
and then I've got another date here.
So why on that, since it's just the same form twice up there, right? Why does it say?
No,
What?
not really the same form. Let me explain. It's not the date of closing or opening. I believe these are the dates that the benefits were entered in on. So in other words, this is today's date. So if I put another benefit in there, it would show that I put a benefit in on this case today. This benefit was entered in on 4/14/2015.
Okay,
And
so the way it defaults though, because I can tell you because
it defaults to today.
But that, or in my experience, I don't know if anyone else has this, but when I open this page up for the first time, I've never entered an outcome before. There's 2 dates already entered, and the top one is the opening day, and the bottom one is the date. I guess you're right, the date that I'm now opening it up.
Yeah, if you're opening up for the first time, it would more than likely be today's date, or it would be if you open this case up. Let's see when it was opened up. It was opened 4/14, and then if I go to outcomes here, it's 4/14 because it probably defaulted to the opening date. Yeah.
Oh, I understand. Okay, so in other words, the date should be whatever date you're entering the outcome on.
So you know when they go in,
Got it.
and it's clear that you didn't put one in before the case was closed, and then you put the other one in 6 years after the case. It just wouldn't make any sense.
I got it.
And so being able to sort of identify when they went in makes a whole lot of sense for compliance. Okay. All right. Let's keep going through our list here. Okay, I'm sorry.
Is there an unlimited amount of outcomes you can put in? Because I tried to, and I had trouble getting past 3.
No, there's no problem. You just need to scroll down. Do you have trouble scrolling down?
When I scroll down to 2 and 3.
It's right here. You should be able to do it. So if we pick an outcome here, you've got one there. Here's 3. If I do an outcome here, let's put another outcome in. There's another one. And if I scroll down here with the scroll bar, there's a blank one, so I'm going to put in 4. So I should be able to just go down there and get in 4. right there. And so there it is. And it gives you a count right down here. You see I've got 4 in. So I think it has something to do with living in Shreveport. That's my theory. I can't prove it, but that's what I suspect. All right, so we've looked at litigation. I don't mean to be, I did mean to be facetious, but did that answer your question? Yeah, I think it's you just have to be careful because those scrolling bars can be a little bit of a pain in the push. All right, we talked about the litigation screen. We've talked about outcomes, and we said the corporation doesn't dictate which outcomes you use. It's a tab. You've got a problem code and the word in the description on the find. It can track type of outcome. You can do an unlimited number of outcomes, and it talks to you about how, in fact, you want to decide which outcomes are permissible. And that's more of a policy decision. Remember I said you could limit it just to that problem code. You could say anything in the housing area, or you could say we're going to let people choose any type of outcome because in a legal case, many different things could come about. So it can be done that way. Let's talk about conflicts now. That's more of a compliance issue with, or actually let's talk a little bit about error checking. You all are aware that when the system starts, are you aware that when the system starts up, you get a list of errors?
Yes.
You're aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, have you noticed how there's less and less errors that it's finding? Yeah, I wonder why. I guess people are paying a little more attention, and what happens is they'll gradually disappear because you'll realize, I might as well do it right the first time, that way I won't have to worry about it the next time. There are some changes that we've got. One of the tests that are being used by the system when you exit, now when you exit an eligibility slip or you exit a client intake sheet, it will run those same tests on that individual case and tell you about it. You can still exit and ignore it, but that means you're going to get dinged tomorrow, and you'll see it in that big list the next day, and so you might as well take care of it now rather than opening it up tomorrow. And so that's kind of a new feature. I don't know if I can find my case. Let me see if I can find that, because that's really particularly bad. I'll go to client search. I'll go HM asterisk. That should find it for me. Here, and enter. Yeah, there it is. So if I open this case up, I don't need to keep this open. So if I go in here and I say, oh, I want to close it, this is a particularly bad case. As you can see, I have 1 or 2 errors in it. I don't have a county, a state, a case number begins with a blank, first name begins with a blank, person helped is missing. So if I don't fix these, I'll see them tomorrow. So I might as well kind of take care of the ones that I can take care of. I can still say exit, because none of these are critical to actually creating a record so I can get out, but I'm going to get dinged about it tomorrow.
Did you hit error alert to get that?
No, that did it automatically.
But if I had that open now, I can hit error alert.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to get into that. An alternative is you can just get that before you even exit by just hitting that, and then it'll tell you that ahead of time. We do use conditional formatting. We mentioned that earlier, that it should say in a light red what fields absolutely have to be filled out, and you won't be able to exit without them, and so you need to pay particular attention to that. But there's also some others in here where if you have bad values and whatever, it'll pick them up for you. So having the error alert here is useful. Now, what I did is yesterday I showed folks the admin way of looking at things, the way that the person who's going to be running, the administrator in your office. I think it's useful. Let's look at that. They see a different error alert than you do. They have a whole other list of buttons. And if we go to error alert here, admin, what you'll notice is it looks the same as yours, except at the bottom, they have all kinds of buttons that you don't have, all right? One of the things they can do is run an error check against all errors for everybody. So they're going to see it, all the errors in the system. Now, if you wanted to be able to know something about those errors, is there a way that you can think of grouping them so that it would be helpful? Well, one way is you might want to group them by the type of error. Wouldn't that be useful? So if you group by error down here, what this does is it tells you, you can limit it to a person. This tells you where the errors occurred. You have 55 clients closed, missing a litigation record. You have eligibility marked as LSC eligible with no assets. You can see that. Now, what can this be useful for? Well, if you're an administrator in an office, you can look at this and you could say, our staff might need to have a training on a particular area because we seem to have a lot of errors in that area. You understand what I'm saying? So it can pinpoint perhaps training needs. But there's another report in here that may be even more interesting, which is you can run these error report. You can run it by, if I close this one down, you can actually run it by who did it. And you could say, wow, we only have to train 3 people.
John, yeah.
We don't need to be mean about that. If we train these 3 or 4 people, those are the ones who are committing the errors. We don't have to take the whole staff aside and train them because everybody else seems to be doing it right. But let's focus on those people who are making the errors, and then we can go back and look at what errors are being made, and we can sort of sculpture our training to what their needs are. Does that make sense? Yeah, and so that's one thing. Now, some of you might wonder mysteriously, how do we choose what gets error checked? And we give you a whole list of things that can be checked, but if you go down here to pick stored procedures, one of the things you can do is go in here, and by just unchecking these, they won't be used in the process of checking either off the intake sheet or during startup. So for example, if you don't use the litigation screen, we would just go in here and find, I'm going to look for the litigation screen. I'll right click and I'll go text filter contains, and I'll type LITI, and hit enter. And you can see I might uncheck both of those, and that way it wouldn't check to see if there was a missing litigation screen. If you don't use case activity, remember you have time activity, which says it's a matter, or it's case related, or it's a supporting activity. That's actually the case number, but if you have the time activity would be the A for case related, an M for a matter, or an S, anything that begins with that. If you don't use, if it's a case related case, if you don't enforce that people have to say what type of casework they did, you could shut that error check off and you wouldn't see that error. But if you wanted people to say, well, it's case-related work I did, and this is what I did. I did discovery, I did an interview, I did something else, then you could turn that on and it would show an error if people didn't fill it out. So that's how it's chosen. You just go through and uncheck. It makes it very, very simple. Another thing that can be done is if some of the error checks, I think we did this for some of the 0 years old, people had problems with that. I think we modified some of the stored procedures. We can go in and modify stored procedures so that they check things. Like we say unusual characters in the county name. And in some counties or in some states, they have like hyphens in their county name or apostrophe for like St. George's County. And so we'll just go in and shut that check off. So it's checking all the other unusual characters, but it doesn't check for an apostrophe because that might be permissible. Does that make sense to everyone, how this is used? So the administrator can run this against everybody's cases, take a look at them, find out where the errors are being made, who's making the errors, and can help by training or pinpointing certain places and telling people, you need to do it this way or that way because it's showing up. Okay, so besides this, what happens if you have custom queries that you use for error checking, or you want to run some other error checking? If we go to the report selector, we go to reports here, not search, sorry. We go to reports and we go to the report selector. There is a section here that talks about near duplicate cases. If you go in here, you can check based upon address, name, social security number, conflicts, and lawyers. You can check for all kinds of different errors in here, and you can even add your own list of error checking queries into this list so they could be run off of a menu. And so that can be helpful. Do people understand what near duplicates are? Let's say that you have a client who has a utility problem this year, and you go into the database and you find out that that person has 3 cases that are marked as utility problems. That's a near duplicate because, number one, they might be 3 intakes on the same problem, in which case you can only count 1. But one might be water, one might be gas, and one might be electricity. Now, I have a terrible joke that will probably empty the room. That would be good for me, wouldn't it? Okay. Another place where you could run into problems is, let's say you've got a divorce, right? If you go in there and you find the same client listed during the year with a divorce, unless it's 2 separate people, more than likely it's going to be a duplicate. Or if the client is a heavy flog. You know what a heavy flog is? You don't know what a heavy flog is? It's a big amiss.
Happy fall.
Sorry.
I just thought he was gonna give it.
Nobody left. I was hoping we'd empty the room on that one. But. All right. So you've also got some private bar involvement. Some of these reports would report on things that are impossible to make mistakes on because we've screwed down the checking on it. There's things that can happen on a table level. And what I mean by that is inside of SQL Server, you could say for this field, it can only allow values that exist in this other table. How would that work? Well, let's say on your client intake, you have a funding code, right? Well, there's also a pull-down table that gives you a list of funding codes. You could say only allow into this field on the client intake a number that exists in this other table. And so if somebody tries to put anything else in there, it doesn't allow it. We've done that for about 67 different fields at least. I know I had to do them all. So you go through, so it means you can't even put them in, you can't save the record, or you can't even move out of the field because you'll get an error saying it's not one of the permissible values. And so that means that your data will be better because it's just impossible to put in values.
Why wouldn't that work in the area code field? Because I find sometimes I need to be so busy typing, I realize I'm typing the entire number in the area code number. We know it's only 3 digits. Why is it set with a standard?
There is a table that supports it. I think we might, I know right now it does, because we couldn't import bad area codes.
I'm sure, I did that the other day, and that's why I was so, so that's the kind of things I wanted to report to Linda.
It allows you to put in a bad area
I just
code.
typed the whole phone number in there, it's just.
Did you
putting
move
it
out
in.
of the field?
I deleted, I had to delete out the
But
field.
delete it before you moved?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
just
it
was
wouldn't
saying
allow
it
you to
shouldn't let
save
me-
it. Yeah.
Okay, I was just saying it shouldn't have let me at least type 6 or 8 numbers.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't allow you to save it is the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, because right now all the area codes are being checked against the area code. And if you've got a new area code or an area code in a state, there's a table you just go in and add it to, and then you don't have any problems. You know, you just tell them that there's a new area code in Louisiana that you go into it's called sub-state area codes, the name of the table. Just go in and add the value there, and you won't get the error anymore. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about conflict checking. It's both kind of a art and a science. How many people? We already talked about all people and all phones. That can be useful for checking. That shows up on all of the conflict check pages. It's got a slightly different name than all people and all phones. I think it's called, what is it called here? It's called check all names and check phone numbers in here. Now, how many people use alternate names? Oh, good, good. All right, somebody raised their hand, that's good. Now, this would never happen in Louisiana because you'd never have a client named Billy Bob Jones, okay? But, so stay with me on this hypothetical idea of Billy Bob Jones. What's the problem with error checking or conflict checking on Billy Bob Jones? No, so many. That wasn't what I was looking for, but it might be true. Yeah, the problem could be, it could be William Robert, it could be Bob, it could be Bill, it could be Billy, it could be, somebody might have entered it in a whole bunch of ways, and you wouldn't pick it up because if you're just looking strictly for Billy Bob Jones, you might miss Billy Robert Jones or Bob Jones, or you might miss Bill Jones. So what we've got here is an alternate name check here. And let's look for my example, which is Billy. If I can manage not to hit the wrong keys, tab. And I'll do Bob. And I will do Jones. Do y'all want to see what words it's looking for? I'll just check, show names used. Name check. There it is. It's checking for Wilda, Humero, Billy, Willie, Bud, Willie, Bill, Billy, Will, Willis, William, Roberto, Robbie, Bobby, Dobbin. That sounds like Harry Potter. We've got Robin, Bob, Dob, Rob, Rupert, Roberta, Robert, Bob, and some other ones down there that I get too tired of reading. And so if we take a look, here you can see it found the William Joneses, and it's weaker because you get more hits, but it's stronger because it can deal with the diminutives and the problems. So most of the time you'll be using that probably on family cases. So everybody understand you can actually go in and modify that table. It's got about 2,500 entries, and it could be modified if you had Vietnamese clients or if you had Chinese clients where you might have had spellings different or something. You could go in there and change it so that it would also double check some of the alternate spellings, for Asian names, for Hispanic names. These have some Hispanic names that showed up in the actual check, but those could be modified. It's not all that difficult to do. Anybody use Sounds Like? Okay, good. She gets all the fun. She raises her hand all the time. That's nice. What sounds? If we go to search conflicts, under search conflicts, what you've got the ability to do is put in a name that sounds like something. So if I'm looking for, let's say, bird, B-Y, or let's just say B-I-R-D, I-R-D, and I hit enter, I've got only one client that's Bird. You see it? Michael Bird. But if I say, well, maybe the spelling's different, whatever, I can click on here, name sounds like, and if I type in Bird, B-I-R-D, and what I do is I say, okay, what I do is I get a hit of all these. I get Bird, B-Y-R-D, I get Bert, I get Bert, I get Bird, I get Barrett, I get Bird over here. What it does is it uses something called the Soundex formula. The Soundex formula was developed for Ellis Island in the 1890s. When immigrants were coming across, a lot of the people in Ellis Island would misunderstand or misspell the names. And so they developed this test that keeps the first letter, throws away the vowels, makes the hard-sounding consonants the same, and goes through and builds it and then checks for that. So that's what this is doing, is using the U.S. Census Soundex formula. Now some of them are ridiculous, like Broadway doesn't sound like bird to me at all. But there are some like Bert or Beard or something where it actually does find something that's pretty close to what you're looking for. Now one of the things that I'd like to do, I just haven't had a chance because the state of Louisiana has just kept me busy, is I like to do a conflict check where we do some weighing of certain things such as telephone number and address and stuff. So when you did a conflict check, you might be able to get a percentage of how close it might be based upon certain things. So if the name was exactly the same, it might be 100%. If the name was slightly different, but it had the same phone number. So you could weigh some different factors. But to do that, it's going to take some thought and some work in putting it together. I tried doing it, and it's a handful. So that's something I'm going to look at. One other thing that we do check, this is going to be in the advanced thing tomorrow, is from your standpoint as a user, it's pretty easy to use. You can go down here, and if it's set up correctly, you can check funding code. And what it does is it comes up with a list of suggested funding codes with their priority ratings. So This case would satisfy contributions, fundraising, kids in need of care, defense, and LSC for funding codes. And you can see the top two priority would be funding code 4, funding code 6. What it does is, you don't even want to know. What it does is it takes into account 57 different criteria on the client intake sheet, which includes location, such as area code, zip code, county, city, all the location things in there. It can take into account client status, what their race is, what their age is, what their, anything having to do with the client. And then it can take into account case information, such as what's the problem code, what's the date open, what's the date closed, what's the sub-problem code. And you can have greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, not equal to. You can do all of those things and build fairly sophisticated tests that will look at your cases and tell you whether or not the funding codes are. There's an administrative test for this that the administrator could run monthly, and it would show all of the cases, and if their funding code was okay, it says okay, and if not, it would say not okay, and you could click on it and it could tell you what funding code would be good. But this is, remember when I don't think you were here in the morning, one of the first things that I said was that there are certain features that do need to be set up to be usable, and that would have to be set up for obvious reasons, because every single program would be different, and you would have different funding codes, and you would have a different test for each one. But it's all menu driven and the like, so that I know that Houston volunteer lawyers, the ones I think I mentioned, they have a panel of 10,000 lawyers. They use that extensively because they have like 70 funding sources, and it makes it very easy for staff to choose which ones are needed. So what we've done here is we've gone through and we've reviewed those things that deal with compliance, such as conflict checking, the Llc compliance on the eligibility sheet. We've looked at outcomes, we've looked at litigation, and we've looked at several other things. Why don't we take a 5-minute break, people walk around before they go to sleep, and we'll come back and deal with search screens and private bar involvement. People are aware of that, but in business, there's an 80-20 rule. 80% of your problems are caused by 20% of your employees. 80% of your profits come from 20% of your customers. It's always this 80-20 rule. That's kind of a rule of thumb that's used in business when you focus on things. So actually what we should probably be doing is spending 80% of our time dealing with the search screens, because we spend a whole lot of our time on the search screens. And so let's go ahead and talk about the way that you use the search screens. Now there's some things that we want to talk about dealing with the search screen, and that is to say first, we've already seen that there's a couple search screens for calendar that are different. Remember, there's the calendar view that lights up in red. We saw that the calendar, also normal search screen, in fact has a ability to do some editing on it, but you've got to be careful to make sure that your ending date is after or the same as your beginning date, or it'll throw an error. So we've learned some things like that. We learned that the search screen is part of the kind of important triumvirate the system's arranged around, which is you add things, you search and find them, and then you do reports on them. And so search is very important. Now, if you're using the tiles, I kind of missed the guy on the first day I picked on a lot because he said he used the book, and by the end of the day he was saying, I'm going to be using the tile. So you can go directly to client search here, and one of the things that you can do is use the speed bar here to begin with. If you'll notice here, I've got 7,528 cases, but if I click here, it will show me only my staff number, and there's 198 cases in there that have 1,000. And they're both open and closed cases. If I click on here, this shows me that there's 647 cases with my office number. If I click here, I've got 784 cases with my default unit number. Well, what is my default unit number? I don't have a clue. So what I'm going to do is click here and type and I, and my default unit number has to be 2 because that's the only thing it's showing. I could also go in here and say, where am I an intake worker? If I click here, there's 7 places I'm listed as an intake worker on the case. And if I want to see where I'm a co-counsel, I click here, and there are 2 places where I'm listed as a co-counsel in the case. Does everybody follow that so far? There is some things that you have to be careful about here. Let me kind of show you what those are. If we start off here and click Use All, not that one, this one, it's a different Use All. And I type in the word Smith. How many Smiths do I have in the system? 7528. But do I have that many, or do I only have 198? Or do I have 6,047? Or do I have 784? Or do I have 7? Or do I have none? Or 2? I must have changed something. Oh, it changed from Smith up here. You've got to be careful how you're dealing with the speed bar, because it does affect your search. And that can be really panicking. That usually happens to me during the training, where I'm looking for a particular name and I didn't notice I left it under, let's say, my office. And I know the record's there, but it's not showing up. It's because I'm not using the full data set. Does that make sense? So I've limited it just to like, show me all the clients in my office, and that one client I want to find is not in my office. And so just be careful. The safest is use all, unless you just always want to see your office. And some search screens may default to office or whatever. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do with the system. If you're doing the search screen, I would recommend that you, while you're using it, if you're doing a lot, what you want to do is you want to uncollapse the ribbon. And the reason for that is if you go here, you've got all the stuff that you can do here with working with it, and that we're going to be using that. So in other words, if you wanted sorted this by last name, you click on last name and you go A to Z, and you've got it sorted A to Z, or you do Z to A and you've got it sorted Z to A, and it's right there. And that's really, really helpful. You can remove the sort here. Some other things that you can do is, let's say I want to find a client named Pulliam. Well, if I asked you how to spell Pulliam, I'd probably get 5 or 6 different spellings in the room. You know, you can use PUL asterisk, and that would in fact pull up all the clients in the system that begin with PUL. The asterisk is known as a wildcard. It represents any number of characters. Let me show you how that is different from a question mark. If I change this to a client first name, and here's client first name. If I change this and I say I'm looking for a person whose first name begins with a J and then ends with an N, and I hit enter, you'll notice I have John, Jason, Joyce Ann, Jackson, Jacqueline, Jason. However, if I change this from a asterisk to a question mark, what's going to happen here is that I'm only going to get Jan, because I'm saying I only want a single character. And the only first name in there that begins with a J, ends in an N, and has a single character is J-A-N. And so that's why it's limiting it that way. So that's kind of a cool feature. Let's say that I helped a person last week and their last name was Geldman or Goldman or something. I could go asterisk M-A-N, and that would find all the, what am I doing here? Why am I doing? Oh, first name. See it? You have to be careful. I made that mistake on purpose to show you how you can do that. All right. So I'm going to change this to last name. It doesn't work. And if I just change a single character here and put it back in, it should be fine. There we go. And as you can see, I have all the names in here that are ends in an M-A-N. So if I wanted to, I could find all the people. You see I get 122 hits. If I change this and put the asterisk at the beginning, so I do asterisk here, and I hit enter, what you see is only 15 people whose last name begins with an M-A-N. But if I do asterisk MAN asterisk, that means MAN can show up anywhere in the system, and if I hit enter, you'll see I'm up to 148 hits, where MAN is at the end, or at the beginning, at the end, and it'll also show up anywhere in the inside. MAN can show up. So that allows you to find Justo Fernandez Gonzalez. If you're not sure it's Fernandez Gonzalez or whatever, you can do that and look for it. You can also do it this way, which is you can do S asterisk T, and what you'll notice is we've got Swift, Sargent, Scott, Stewart. So you've got anything beginning with an S, ending in a T. But don't think of this only as a tool for dealing with names. How many people do housing? You ever do an apartment complex where you've got a bad apartment complex?
Yeah.
Yeah? Wouldn't it be nice if you could find if you had, see, we have X clients. If you're in private practice, you have clients. You may not be helping them right now with a problem,
Yeah.
but they're your clients.
Yeah.
But we always think of them as being X. Wouldn't it be nice if you had a client come in, she said or he said, I've got a problem with this apartment complex, and you could go see if you had other clients that live there? Let's do that. It's simple. First thing we do is we change, let's say we're looking for all the people who live on Main Street. What we do is go down here and we're going to look for address, right? What do I put in over here?
Do you put asterisk space Main Street?
Close, real close. No, I would do asterisk. You could do a space. I might do main asterisk. Because we don't know if it's street or ST or avenue, or they didn't put in anything and they just said main. And we don't know the exact address. The apartment of our client may be 72 Main Street, but there might be a 72A, or there might be a 73, 74, 75. And so by using the wildcards, what I can do is click on this, and what ends up happening is, hit enter, it will find all the clients. But Doug currently is looking at this saying, he's a skeptic. He's saying, how do I know they're on Main Street? Aren't you saying that, Doug?
Yeah.
I thought so. I could see he was that way. So one of the things you can do is click here, and you can go and you can change this from city. Doug tells me I should change it to address. Did you work in a carnival? Because I heard you project your voice over to here, and I wondered. All right, so if we click address here, you can see all the main streets in here. You see that? And you can see, oh yeah, these people live pretty close. Maybe I should send them a letter and let them know about the fact that we're challenging the conditions of that apartment complex. And since they're our clients, not our ex-clients, we thought you may want to join in on that. You're not soliciting anybody. You're informing clients of their rights. You know. Yeah, we used to do all kinds of crazy litigation. We would invent types of law. I was in West Virginia before they had a implied warranty of habitability, so we used to argue that you had a common law right not to be partially constructively evicted, which is the implied warranty of habitability, just by another name. And the judge said, oh yeah, I understand that. So you can use these wildcards for a whole bunch of different things. If you were going to find John Smith in here, how would you find him? Good. Who said that? Ah, excellent. Yeah, some people would say, well, I'd pick Smith, and then I'd start scrolling through, or maybe I'd sort it by first name. But a lot of people aren't aware that you can, now, I'm going to be good, and I'm going to change it from address instead of looking for an address called John Smith. If you're on the last name here, the system's written, so if you put in Smith, comma, John, and hit enter, it's going to find John Smith for you, which is much faster than looking for Smith and then sorting through. So if you all are aware of that, that's great, but if you weren't, that could be a real time saver when you're looking for a full name. And if you did learn it, then somebody trained you good, so that's good. All right. There's some other things that we saw on the search screen earlier. We saw the closing sheet here. Incidentally, let's do show all again here. Incidentally, who is advocate number 8? What's their name? You know what's interesting? This is, when I do trainings, I always like to do this. If you ask a question of a lawyer and the lawyer doesn't know an answer, they usually make one up. If you ask a support staff person, I don't know.
Yeah.
But lawyers almost always will try to come up with some answer. Anyway, what you do is press staff, and it'll tell you the person's name, right there.
Yeah.
So if you use that button, what it does is it allows you to actually see who a particular staff name is. Do people have these pesky little exclamation points in there? Sometimes. We cleaned them out. There's a utility now. If you're an admin and you want to clean those out, you can go to admin here and you see it says clear exclamation points. Usually do that when nobody's in the system if you can. That's probably the best. Usually that happens when people exit improperly or in a way that we didn't anticipate. Remember I said we anticipate A, B, C, D, E, and some people go E, B, A, C, F, G, and so we just never anticipate it, so it never gets cleaned out. And we keep knocking those down, but people keep doing things differently. So if you want to see who's using the system, you click on it here, and I would suggest that you probably just go to that Advocate 1000's office, brick up the door because it looks like they're dead draped over their computer because they've been in the system into that record since 3/14, which is a few months, and so that they're probably not alive anymore, or else they're not using it. Now, do you all know that you can use internal messaging at this point?
Yes.
Okay, and do you know that you can use internal messaging here even if you don't have an exclamation point? You could go here, you could pick using, and then you can just send a message. So you could do that without any problems. And do you know that you can use internal messaging directly from the intake sheet? If you open up an intake sheet here and you go to internal messaging, let's find that. It's going to be on page 3, I believe. Internal messages here. You'll notice here there's a send. So you can just pick send here. So and there's one of these on eligibility, and there's one of these also on the callback record. So you can use internal messaging from several different points.
That's just like an email, is what you're saying?
It's internal to the system, though. It's stored with the case, and if they're not in the system, it will, next time they come in, it'll tell them they have a message. If they're currently in the system and they get sent a message, a pop-up will occur and say you have an internal message. Do you want to look at it? And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. That wasn't checked off on the survey very much, but I thought I wanted to mention that. Right now what we're dealing with is in fact the intake screen, and because I'm here, all I need to do is click here and I can go into the search screen. I'll do show all. How many people would like to see how you find all your open landlord-tenant cases in 3 clicks? Nobody? Oh, okay, 2 people. Wow. All right. The way that you do that is it's known as drilling down. And it's helpful to have this screen open here. You can collapse the ribbon, but you can also uncollapse it. And when you uncollapse it, you don't have to keep pulling it down to use it. And it's more convenient for something like this. So you can do this in whatever order you want to. Incidentally, when you do, before we get to that, I want to show you something here. I'm going to do Smith here, and this should be all my Smiths, and then I'm going to do Jones, and then I'm going to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go delete. Now this would work for any types of things that I'm putting into this block. I'm going to do Martinez here, and enter. Now you notice these arrows appear. And what would Doug say about these arrows? Click on them. So if you click on this, this shows me my Joneses. This shows me my Smith search. That's my first search. If I want to go forward, I can click here. I go from my Smith search. I can go to my Jones search, I can go to my Martinez search, and if there were additional ones, it would allow me to go forward. Now, if you exit the search screen, you lose the memory of what those searches were. And it works primarily up here with just this white box. It doesn't work on drill down, which we're going to look at next. But I did want to let you know about that so that you were aware of it. Let's talk about drill down. Let's say that I'm not really sure what a particular problem code is. I want to find all my open landlord-tenant cases. If I go here and I go to problem codes, certain choices on the pull-down list will give you a pull-down showing you what the values are. So we can scroll down until we know housing's 60s. So if I go into housing, I find it's called private landlord-tenant. So I click on this. What happens is there are how many landlord-tenant cases in here? 3,309. But I don't want all landlord-tenant. I want my landlord-tenant. So I'm going to be staff member 1. I'll click here and I'll say filter by selection. Where is it? Up. I have to be under search. Here. There we go. Selection equals 1. So how many landlord-tenant cases do I have? 1170. But I don't want all my landlord-tenant cases, do I? I only want my open ones. And incidentally, what I'm showing you here will work with private lawyer screen. It'll work with eligibility screen. It'll work with calendar. It'll work with timekeeping search screens. They all work the same. So I said I wanted just my open landlord-tenant cases, correct? And a case is open if it isn't closed. So here's a blank date closed. I single click and I do selection equals blank. And how many open landlord-tenant cases do I have? 29. You want to do the bonus round? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to close here. We're going to start all over just for fun. We'll go here. And I'm going to say, okay, what I'm going to do, excuse me, is I'm going to pick show all just so I can drill. I'm going to pick problem codes. I'm going to pick advocate 1. I know it's me. And I'm going to do equals 1. So I have 2,700 cases. I want my 63s. So I click here. I say equals 63. So I have, in fact, 1,170 landlord-tenant cases. And then I want to pick my open ones. So I go here and I say equals blank. And now I want all my open landlord-tenant cases where the client does not live in Atlanta. So I single click on Atlanta, I go to selection, and I choose does not equal Atlanta, or does not contain Atlanta, either one. So I click here, and I have 15 open landlord-tenant cases where my client does not live in Atlanta. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to find all my single-parent households. How do I find them? Do we store household?
Yes.
That's the same answer people gave yesterday. That's a short answer, but a shorter answer and a more correct one is no, we don't. We store adults and children. Now, person's help was designed so if you did impact litigation, you might have 2 adults, 3 children, but person's help may be 5,000. You see? Because if you change the law dealing with Social Security, your impact might be much greater than the family size. Because otherwise you can just add together. So we only store adults and children. So one of the first things whenever you do a report, you have to ask yourself, do you store the information? Can we do a report on the number of people who have different eye colors? No. Why can't we?
We don't know their
We don't have it. Now, if we know we need it, we could use one of the user-defined fields and say that, change the label from SP code 1 to eye color, and maybe change the pull down so it stores either an abbreviation, or we could use a special program to do that, or we possibly could hijack another field and use it for something other than what it was intended. But right now we can't do it because we don't have that information, right? Okay, here it's kind of a gray area. The best that we could probably come up with is what? How many adults would be in a single parent household? 1. How many children? At least 1. So, how do I do that here? Well, adults and children aren't here, so I can't choose them here. But what I can do is I can change, let's change this one to adults. It's easier to type AD. And children, I'll type CH. All right. And so I'm going to pick children and hit enter. That should work. And there's my number of children. So the first thing you told me is what? How many adults?
1.
So I single click on adult, I go to selection, and I say equals 1. And I have how many? I have 4,600 where there's just a single adult. But now I want to choose children. Well, if I can't say 1 or more, I can say not 0. I single click on 0. Selection does not equal 0. How many single parent households, as close as I can figure, do I have? 29, 25. Can you see how you can use that to go in there and do things that you didn't think you could do by just changing which fields are being displayed? And these arrows that show up, notice they're not showing up here. They only show up if you use this sort of searching here. So, we've already looked at sounds like. How many people use difficult people? Well, it's difficult. Yeah, some people said I want to put staff in there, and some people say you should default all clients to difficult people. But I think those people are pretty cruel who say that. All right. So, one of the ways you might do that is, for example, let's find Kemp here. K-E-M-P. And what I can do is I might say, oh, I got this guy coming in. I don't know, what's the deal on him? I'll look under difficult people. Oh Lord, he's got a bunch of write-ups. Difficult or dangerous people. I remember I used to teach basic lawyering skills for negotiation and also for interviewing. And I trained a bunch of attorneys on interviewing, and one of them came down from her office to see me and said, I'm so glad I had the training you gave me on interviewing. My first client pulled out a 6-inch knife and started cleaning his fingernails. And so she did a whole bunch of stuff that I told her, that she should do. She said it was a great interview, it was no problem, but it made her feel uncomfortable. All right, so if I go in here, I can actually go and check. So I can check for difficult or dangerous people. I can do it from a search screen. Of course, I could open this up, and if I open that intake up, I'll keep the search screen open. You can see that he kept leaning on my desk and belching, appears under the influence. What kind of recommended action require client agreement? Client won't come to the office stoned and will show up for his appointments, and if he doesn't, then we won't represent him. You could do that. You can keep track of up to 5 different incidences. You have to document this if you deny representation to someone. In all my 14 years of practice in legal services, I only did it once. But this will allow you to document it. There's some new things added, I think, under difficult, dangerous. There is, I think, a communicable disease, contagious medical problem. There is also, for the older staff members in the office, repeat story multiple times. I think I have that problem. But you can, if you deal with seniors, sometimes you'll find, we had Fred Frad, who used to come in every 6 months and want to get his 1932 railroad benefits. And he had this lemon lime outfit and he played the harmonica. It was great. But it was kind of, you recognized Fred was coming in. It was kind of a holiday. Hey Fred, come on in, put your shopping cart over there. So that was good. So difficult, dangerous people will show up several different places. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If we actually go into an intake sheet, this works for callback, this works for eligibility, this works for the client intake. You can see here, you can set a difficult person here. You can add the client as a difficult person. You can add a non-client as a difficult person. My client comes in, or this client comes in with their adult child, a son who won't shut up, and you can't talk to the client because the son keeps answering. You can say, search for difficult people. Boy, this person's giving me some trouble. Let me see if somebody else in the office has had that problem. So difficult, dangerous people become important in large offices where you may not be aware of what, somebody in the housing unit knows this person is bad news, whereas it doesn't, if you had this, you could check it out and even see it in multiple offices. How do I remember all these things about search screen? Well, Doug would tell you, press the help button, right, Doug? And it would tell you how to get pull down method, how to search for first and last name, the drill down method I just showed you. It would also talk to you about changing the display fields, searching the notes, and it would tell you about stop a search from disappearing, going back with the arrow buttons. It prints what shows up on the screen, not necessarily what's there. Show all and open the record. So it does talk to you about that. Okay? Yeah.
How do you without the search, how do you quickly determine if your current client had prior cases with the office?
Conflict check.
Yeah. Was
Yeah.
there else in the intake sheet that you, I thought.
Well, it used to be something that said prior. Nobody ever used it. We got rid of it.
Okay.
Nobody else ever used that field. I mean, I can tell you. I've done millions of conversions, and that field's always. Well, what you can do is it's simple enough. All you need to do is, actually the better way of doing it is why not just click, of course if you're using the book you won't see this, but if you just click on all people, that's your best bet because it's going to check callback, it's going to check eligibility, it's going to check eligibility adverse, it's going to check clients, it's going to check clients adverse, it's going to check judges, staff, it's going to check every name in the system to see if that person shows up. That's your best bet. That's so much better. Okay. All right. That's all I have to say about the search screens, unless I find something in my notes here that I didn't cover. Wildcards. We use it for the address, changing displays fields, first and last name. Sounds like drill down. There's a send to Excel. We also saw how it can work as a mini report writer. You can get, remember we just got a list of our single parent households from the system. So by just changing what's displayed, we can drill down and get things that we didn't think that we would get. Incidentally, you can't do sorts and things on all people. The reason for that is it's a stored procedure which makes it incredibly fast, but it means we can't change it on the fly. If we do search here again, client search, and show all, there was something else that I wanted to briefly mention. Mini report writer, use the search ribbon bar choice, sort easy. Up here, dates. One of the things that you can do is if you just highlight a single date field and you go up here, you can pick ends with 2002. Well, if you click on this, this gives you all your cases with a date opened of 2022. You see that? So you can partially highlight something. So if I want to find MONS in the client's last name and I do selection contains MONS, you see it'll pull up all the clients who have MONS in their name. So look at the selection. It does a whole bunch of things. Last thing is, if you have on any socks or pantyhose, you might want to hold on to them because this knocks them off usually. What we'll do here is we'll do show all. And if we go in here and we want to look at a date field, this is really kind of cool. If you single click on the date field and you go up to filter, click, and it says date filters. Look at what you can choose from date filters. See, that was a wow. That was good. Date filters, you can do equals, does not equal, before, after, between, tomorrow, today, yesterday, next week, this month, last month. It can be this quarter, year to date, last year, past, future, all dates and period. You see? And so that gives you a whole bunch of choices in terms of dates. All right? All right, good. Let's go ahead and do our volunteer lawyers section, okay? And hopefully we can get a lot done in a small period of time. One of the first things that you have to do, we talked about this morning, is that when you put in and you start doing private bar involvement, it won't work unless you put your lawyers in, okay? And so what you can do is I'm going to go to search here, but you would go to add, and I'm going to actually go to pro bono PBI here, another reason to use the tiles. And if we go here, I can do lawyer search, and I can do show all. And remember, the ones in yellow don't have cases. The ones that are grayed out are no longer on the panel, and the other ones have cases and are on panel. So if I pick up, let's say, I'm going to do an A to Z sort for last name. I'll do A to Z here, and I'll pick John Angard because I know he has cases. So if I open his intake here, we're going to talk a little bit about why doesn't it auto number. The reason it doesn't auto number is because we want to be able to put in the Bar Association number if you use that. We want to be able to put in dashes if you need to do that. We want to put in letters if you need to do that. So you could code in lawyers by putting, let's say, OR for Orleans County and then a number, dash and a number if you wanted to. So it allows you to use basically, if they have a bar number with a dash in it or a letter in it, it allows you to use that bar number, local bar number, whatever you want to do, you can use. The reason for the pull down here is it allows you to see which numbers had been used, and you don't choose any of these because it would cause a duplicate. Make sense? And somebody asked me, well, how do I look at this if in fact I want to find out what the last number that was used is, and I don't want to always pull this down. I said write it down on a piece of paper and put it next. That'd probably be the easiest solution. You notice how it's sorting here? The reason it's sorting not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is because this is a text field, and it alphabetizes it. So if you alphabetize it, 1 would be first, 1, 0 would be second, 1, 0, 0 would be third. So it's alphabetizing the list because it's a text field. We could try to put this in order of the number, but if you ended up putting letters in there and dashes and things, it makes it really difficult because it wouldn't treat those as numbers. So that's why it does it that way. You've got whether or not they're currently on panel. If you take them off panel on the search screen, they gray out. We've changed the wording on this so it's clear. Instead of VLSP and VLRS, we say volunteer panel and lawyer referral panel. In California, when I was in Sacramento, we had both a lawyer referral panel and we did it for the Bar Association, and we also had a pro bono panel, so we wanted to mark those. Some people use this for different things. You know about the city-state button, I assume everybody knows. If you put in the zip code and you hit city-state, it'll fill it in. If it doesn't fill it in, you've either put in the wrong zip code or it's perhaps a new zip code that's not in the system. You should let Linda know about it and they can add it in for everyone so it shows up. There's a reduced fee panel, date on the bar. What we were accused of is removing this button. Fact is that we're lucky this is the only button that didn't move over. When we converted the system, there's over 105 or 10,000 lines of code and 400 forms and stuff. And we missed this, it's now back. If you display in a search screen, it shows all of the cases that lawyer's handling in a search screen, which allows you to double click and go into it and do whatever you want. You could double click here and it will also allow you to go in. Auto, remember I talked to you about current age and I talked to you about other calculated fields. These are calculated fields that go in automatically. This says that this person has taken 17 cases. In the last 12 months, they've taken only 1 case. That's really important when you start looking to do a referral. Not only in the, what have you done for me today? What have you done for me in the last 12 months? You might have taken 5 cases 10 years ago, but you haven't done anything recently. It's not helpful. This also tells you whether or not they have an ongoing case, whether or not when they last took a case, and the last time you had any report from them on activity. It also adds up all their time for you automatically off those time slips, and it will show it to you. This page is kind of useless, so I'm not going to talk about it. Do you guys use any of this? Nobody ever does. It's one of those things where they come out with this thing from a corporation or something. Oh, you need all these fields. All right, I put them in. Nobody ever uses them. So, you've got some miscellaneous ones down here that could be useful if you needed to track something specific. There's 3 of them here. You could use that. This is really important. How many people use this? Good. If you don't, you are off my Christmas list, okay? And the reason is that this, when you do a search for a lawyer, It uses these two things. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. Linda isn't here, so I can get away with it. And that is, if you don't have any values here under the counties and under the subjects the attorney is willing to handle, we have the ability to run a query that will read all the old cases that they had and say if attorney X handled divorces in the past, we're going to add in their list of what they're willing to do, divorces. If they practiced in Orleans County or Parish in the past, they're willing to practice in Orleans Parish in the future. We can run queries. It doesn't take very long. If you guys need that and it isn't set up, it can save you literally hundreds of hours of going through each lawyer and putting in their specialties. You can go through and say, okay, in the past, this attorney had 30 cases and handled them in three different parishes. It'll automatically just put that in all at once, so we can do it pretty quick. If you want to do it manually, let's say the lawyer got in a fist fight with a judge in DeKalb County, you can click here and say okay, and it's going to remove DeKalb County from the list. If you do set subjects here, you can say they're not willing to handle contracts anymore, but they are willing to do unfair sales practices, and you save and exit. What it does is it now puts in unfair sales practices down here, and it removes contracts from their specialties there. So it allows you to put in specialties. Now, there is a choice that says subjects on the top line. I think it's under add other maybe, where you can add additional subjects. Usually the first 99 subjects are what? The first 99 subjects are the LSC problem codes. Like, your specialty is 63, well, it's landlord-tenant. Your specialty is 1, it's bankruptcy. But you may have some special panels you want to set up. For those of you who do private bar work, let's say you have Japanese-speaking attorneys and you need to know about them. You could set up a subject, let's say 1001 is Japanese-speaking, 1002 is, let's say, Chinese-speaking, 1003 is Vietnamese, 1004 is Italian, 1005 is German. And you can assign attorneys to those subjects, and that way when it comes time to find a Japanese-speaking attorney, you just go into your pull-down of subjects and you pick Japanese, and it gives you a list of all your Japanese-speaking attorneys. So it allows you to set up special panels using subjects. You can also use it for substantive things. For example, I think during Katrina, we might have added a subject in there called Katrina. So you'd have attorneys who would be willing to help with flood damage, or you'd have attorneys who were willing to work with airship property, or you might have a list of attorneys who are willing to work with HIV questions. You might have, so you can use subjects beyond just kind of the first 99, and you can add subjects that allow you to specialize and deal with things, other issues. So that's very useful. This is contact with lawyer. You generally don't use it here. I'm going to show you where you use it, but this shows you all your contacts you've had with this lawyer. If you have a big office, if you have multiple people referring things out, if you have a failing memory, if you have a drug or drinking problem where you can't remember things anymore, this is a very useful thing to use, okay? And I'm going to show you how it's used in a moment. Notes are here. You might hit date note and type. I wouldn't refer my worst enemy to this lawyer. I ran a Judicare program in West Virginia, and I'd go to court and see people in court, and they'd never get another case. And I also ran a pro bono program. Part of it was pro bono. It was I had staff also in Sacramento, and so I've done both of it. And, that quality control always is questionable at times. So you've got to keep your eyes open. Anyway, you could put notes in here. You can use lawyers' canned notes here to save time. For example, new member. See, I sent new packet member sent to lawyer. The new member packet. This contains information on how to take cases, how to close them, and how to keep in touch with our office. So, that can in fact record things that you do on a regular basis with your private attorneys, just like staff members can use canned notes on a client record to say what they did on a client record. Those of you who are going to be using the PBI portal registration, that's going to fill out information on this tab. If you want to know how that works, you probably want to go to our website, James has a couple videos there that show you and explain how the PBI portal works. Now, I don't know if I've said this before, it's like doing the wills 5 times. I know I said it yesterday, but I wasn't sure if I said it today. That you can go on there and it's www.kempscaseworks.com, and if you look up the PBI portal, there will be videos there telling you how it works and what you can expect from it. So that's kind of good. So once you get a list of lawyers in here, there of course is going to be a search screen for lawyers, and it's going to be slightly different. So if we search and we go to PBI and we go to PBI lawyers, we already know that if we do show all and we have a decent system that doesn't hide the yellow and mess things up, that we can see who doesn't have a case, who's off panel, and who currently does have a case. You can also do multiple search here. I want to find all my lawyers who are in, let's say, Fulton County. I'm down to 332 who are willing to do adoptions. I'm down to 5 attorneys. You see that? There is a complex search here, multi-criteria, which will choke a horse. Oh, that's interesting. Something coming up. Okay, there is a pop-up screen. We need to fix that. That allows you to do multiple searches. That allows you to look at different languages and things and find people. But that's in there. Now, so we've seen things now from the lawyer's standpoint. You could look at lawyers who are currently on your panel. I need to get rid of the other things on here. I can look at lawyers who are off your panel, and I can use all, and that'll show everything. But I'm currently got some limits in here, so I'm going to say close. Let's look at how we use this in terms of a referral to an individual on an individual case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'll look at my open cases. I'm going to find one that isn't currently a pro bono case. I'll pick this client. Let's see if we have an address in here. Be nice to have an address. Okay, this looks good. That's on hold. That'll work. All right, so if I say open intake here, one of the first things you'll notice is that if we go to the PBI tab, there's nothing there. And the reason that it's not there is because this case is currently on hold. It's not a private bar involvement case, PBI. If I change it into a PBI case, what you're going to notice is if we go to the PBI tab, it now fills out with a complete referral system built in here. Somebody asked about the PBI type here being new. Yes, it is a little bit new. The reason it's in here, and this was particularly important for, I think, New Orleans, is because the corporation in doing the reports have been asking, is this PBI done by a contract? Is it done by an in-house? Is it done by a sub-grantee or whatever? And so that's what that takes into account. Where you're reporting to the corporation, you can say what it is. You've got an appointment date if you set that up. You can, if you're using law firms, you can actually anchor a case to a law firm. Let me explain what that means. I'm a participating attorney, and I'm working with the Jones firm. And in February, I take a case, okay? And I finish it, and it's outstanding, and I spend a lot of time on it. But in June, I go to work for the Smith firm. I transfer firms. Under the old system, if you were going to do awards for firms or whatever, my Jones case would show up as being part of, or that I opened when I was in the Jones firm, would show up as being part of the Smith cases because it was depending upon me to give the law firm credit. Wherever I was, that was where the law firm was given credit. But with this field here, you can say that no matter where the private attorney goes, this is in fact the law firm that it's anchored to. So at the end of the year, you can say the Jones firm handled these 7 cases, even though John Kemp handled them and he's now with the Smith firm, it recognizes Jones as being the law firm. So it anchors the case with that. Now, one of the things that I can do is, how do you think, Doug, I find or assign a lawyer? Come on, Doug, you're under pressure. Pick, find or assign a lawyer? How about that?
There you go.
Hey, there you go. I knew that was a tricky question. I recognized, Doug. So. All right. What this does is it automatically brings up a list of all the lawyers who handle the type of problem that the client has in the parish that the client resides. If you haven't filled out those things, it will be blank. In which case you can just say show all, or you can just go in here and say I want to see those people who live in a particular parish, or those people who handle a particular type of case. Or you can just say show all and pick somebody because you don't have any of that information in. It goes back to the first thing I said this morning, which is you can't in fact use a feature unless you've filled things out. You know, so if you don't have the data, you can't find lawyers who handle bankruptcies because you haven't put it in. And a best way to do that would be to do a query against the data. We didn't have time to do that during the conversion, unfortunately. Now, here again, it's not showing up all that well because you don't see the yellow colors very well. But what should happen is you should be seeing yellow cases, which are people who have no ongoing case, and you try to refer to them first. One of the ways you could also do it is you could say when they last took a case. You could sort it A to Z. This is the last case. You go A to Z, and these people never took a case. All right. But we're going to go down here and start with people who have taken a case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call up Donald Primavera. All right. So I'm going to click on Donald, and I see his phone number. But before I do that, I'm going to check with contacts with, because this is going to tell me all the contacts that we've had with them. Last contact we had was in 2022. This is example data. We dated ahead. We'll pretend it's this one. Last time we heard from him was we asked him to do something. It was 2 years ago. Now, if it said that we contacted him yesterday and somebody else in the office said they'll be on vacation until June, or said that they're in a jury trial, or they have some other reason why they can't take a case, you don't want to call them up like a ditz and say, oh, you want to take a case? And he'll say or she'll say, I already told you I'm on vacation until June, or I already have a, So this is really useful for tracking it. Not only can it be used to avoid embarrassment, but it can also be used offensively to play on the guilt of the private lawyers, okay? And you can say, Donald, I called you up, last week. I called you up 3 months ago. I called you up 6 months ago. I called you up 8 months ago. You haven't taken a case. Come on, take a case. So you can utilize that to get an idea of participation. In this case, the person doesn't want to take it or can't. I'm going to say refused case, and I'm going to say in jury trial. If I can do it without my mouse falling apart, and I'll say in jury trial until June. Okay? And I'll misspell until just because I can. So I'm going to say close. And so what I do is I go down to my next one in my list, and I'm going to do Rodrigo. And so I'm clicking on Rodrigo, and I say contacts with, and I say, last time he took one was 2 years ago too. Yeah.
Use constant contact to send emails to large groups at our.
Yeah, that's built into there's an email blast where it will send specific emails to people for the types of cases they said they're interested in the physical location they said they would do it. Also, if you have the PBI portal, they can log in and it will give them a list of those cases, and they can accept them online, and they can upload, download documents, they can put notes in, they can open and close the case, or actually close the case online. Look at those videos on our website, and you'll get an idea of what it's capable of.
So, like, let's say, this person was on the email list that we sent to him, and will it show that he received that particular?
It won't show it here, but if you're sending those things out, it will say it. I'm not sure how it's exactly tracked, if it is, or if it just sends it out based upon that, and you have to trust that James did it right. And James is real smart, so yeah.
Okay.
But he's got it really set up so it's only sending things to people specifically what they've said they're willing to handle. But again, if you don't put that information in, it don't work. You have to know what they're willing to do. But the PBI portal allows the lawyer themselves to go in, and she can go in and say, I'm willing to do divorces, child custody, and domestic abuse. And yeah.
How do they access the PBI portal? They have to have credentials?
Oh yeah, they have to pass words, they have to do all kinds of stuff. They have to jump through hoops, they have to know how to, the secret handshake. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff to make sure that it's safe. Yeah, definitely. James is a real stickler on that. So in this case, Rodrigo says, sure, I'll take the case. So I'm gonna say took case. Once I do that and say close, I just have to hit choose. You're gonna choose this lawyer, and what it's then gonna do is fill out all the information in here for you automatically. You'll notice here it puts him on the case. It puts him as a primary lawyer. It's not a compensated case, not judicare. It shows today as the start date. You could put an end date, and the hours are automatically calculated, so that if I get a letter from him 6 weeks from now saying I finished the case and I've put in 8 hours, then I can put an 8 in here, and I might put in a note, or I might put in the casework that he or she did, but I don't have to. I'll say close. Now, it will auto-update. You don't need to push the button, but if you want to see it immediately, it does refresh it immediately, and there's the 8. If you get another note from them 6 weeks later saying, that client who I thought I had finished, she came back in and I had to provide a couple more hours of advice as to what happened with the judgment, you just click add time and you add a second time slip in here, say close. If you refresh that, you'll see it's 10 hours. You see it? You can, in fact, put stuff into case notes if you want to. If they're on the PBI portal, they have the ability to come in here and put in closure information, put in closure notes. It's really nice. Look at the video. It shows all the different things the lawyer can see. It's really pretty cool. And that's pretty much it, except that there are special, you guys are special, special search screens. For example, on PBI client search, a client must have a PBI and a primary PBI lawyer to record or to show up here. So if I do show all here, this shows all my lawyers, or all my clients, I should say. And if I wanted to see what lawyers Charles Agid had, I could do here and say all lawyers, and he only had one lawyer. You see it? Now, the really cool thing here is if you go to the lawyer and double click, it'll take you to the lawyer's intake sheet from the client. Okay. If we do it the other way around, and we go to PBI lawyer search, show all, and we go and we find a particular, let me search or sort A to Z, because I know some people who have cases. I'll do A to Z. And I pick John Angry. If you click here and you look at cases, this will show you all the cases that they handled. And if you double click, let's say on Sherry Simmons, it will open up Sherry Simmons directly from the lawyer search screen, and we know that that lawyer is listed as a lawyer handled here. Okay? That's about all I've got time to talk about. Oh, there is one more thing I want to talk about. There's a brand new lawyer report sheet that you need to be aware of. It's new as in the sense of a month old or so, and it provides you with 11 new queries and the ability to kind of select things. It shows up a whole bunch of different places. And so let's look at where it shows up. If you go to reports and you go to the tree view search screen, there's going to be PBI report button here. If you go to the preview search screen, there's PBI reports there. If you go to the, let's close that, right here. If you go to the report selector, it shows up here. If we look at it, it explains what it does here, and then it gives you a whole set of really cool queries. This shows you all the case type Ps that have been open in a period. These are case type that have been marked as P that are missing a PBI record. This is case type P with no assigned lawyer. This is case type P assigned in period. Prompts mean that they will ask you for like a beginning period and an ending, the beginning date opened, ending date opened, or whatever it's asking you for. Here's a list of your panel lawyers who don't have an ongoing case right now. Just click on it and it gives you that report. So it gives you a whole series of really cool reports. And then what it also does is it takes, I don't know why it's not closing. It also gives you a whole bunch of stuff that will in fact, in the search screen, where is it here? Is that what I wanted? Yeah. No, it's on the reports, I'm sorry. If you're looking on the report screen, one of the things that it will do is it will give you a selection of the reports broken down on reports that apply to lawyers, reports that apply to PBI clients, and I'll show you that in just a second here. I'll do right here PBI reports, and you can see case reports with lawyer information, case reports, volunteer lawyers, law firms, and all PBI reports together. So that'll take you to the report search screen and show that. As you can see here, there's a whole bunch of really nice reports. We call them common reports. Actually, I was talking with Mike Hoffrichter from Houston Volunteer Lawyers, the one with 10,000 people on their panel, and he had some suggestions for these names, so what I did is use those. And so the reports, be sure to look at that and take a look at it because there's a ton of really good information. Okay, that's search screens and private bar involvement. Let's take a 5-minute break and we'll come back and we'll start working on something else whenever I figure out what it is.
Is Dale in the room? Anyone named Dale?
Well, you know, in Access, you can do either a list of the cases, or you can do like totals about, you know, count how many different things you have, but you can't do both at the same time. In a report, you can actually do both at the same time. And so it has some advantages. So when we're talking about reports, I'm going to be mostly talking about the small r, which includes queries, includes forms, and also includes the capital R report feature. And we'll be looking at that in the report creator a little bit more. I want to mention that we should follow the Doug rule when running reports, which is if there's a button and you want to see what the report looks like, run it, as long as it doesn't say delete or change something, okay? And so it doesn't really usually hurt anything. The worst thing you could probably do is you don't want to run a report that looks at all 2.5 million of your time records if you can avoid it. I mean, you can do that, but you have to understand that that is going to put a burden on the system and it's going to slow things down. So you probably want to restrict that kind of as much as you can when you're looking at things. Where do we find reports? Well, there are about 5 or so, I'd say 3, 4, 5, 6 different places that we can find reports. And let's go ahead and start looking at those so we can get an idea of how to find out what they are and what they do, okay? One of the first places we want to look at is on the first screen that actually shows up on your intake. And if you've got it set for the Today screen, so that when you go in, we're going to pick View and we're going to view the Today screen. If you open up to here, what you've got is you've got a daily worksheet that allows you to do a bunch of stuff that you need to do. But what you also have here is recommended reports and favorite reports, okay? So what you can actually do is go in here and you can look at the list of recommended reports, for example, and you can even get a preview of what they look like. How many people run the date calculator? No one?
Yeah.
So everybody has a calendar that they go 1, 2, 3, 4 on. If you run the date calculator, let me show you as an example. This is a recommended report. We start the report. You have to press the starting date on the left or this won't work. When you open it up, click on today's date on the left or it won't work. You know, when you first begin this, please be sure to pick the left date or else it won't work. Let's say that your client has to, in fact, respond within 90 days. What I can do is click here, I can type 90, I can hit enter, and it tells me they have to respond by Wednesday, August 22nd, 2018. Now, I'm sure most of your clients, or probably all of them, when they get served, bring the papers in that day, right? If they don't do that, you can go in here and say, well, when were you served? Well, I was served on the 3rd. If you click on the 3rd, it automatically changes it to Wednesday, August 1st. Do you see it? So you can actually adjust that interactively if you want. So that's one way that you can use it. Some grants, I don't know if SYNC requires this, but there's some children's grants I know in some states where you have to be able to mention a previous date. So you can in fact put a negative number in there and it'll give you the number of days previous today's date, like 45 days before the date you close the record. You can put that in if you need a negative date. Let me show you the real reason that this exists. If I click on today here and then I go into December here, wrong year, I'll go back, and I'll click here, and I pick December, and I click on the 25th. You have 215 shopping days until Christmas, or 30 weeks. If you prefer, you can substitute your own birthday, and you can find out how much time they have to buy you a present. But that's also useful from the standpoint of, let's say that my client has to make a payment on September 17th. If you click on September 17th, that will tell you that there's 116 days for your client, or about 15 or 16.561 weeks that they have until they have to make a payment. So this can be very helpful for deciding when you want to put in reminder dates and things like that. Where would be a useful place for this to show up? Well, not only does it show up here, but if you go to search here and you go under scheduling, it shows up here. But it also shows up if you go to, let's go to add here, and we go to scheduling, and you go to client calendar slip, there's a date calculator right here. So when you're setting dates, you can use the calculator to determine when you need to set a date, so that you can in fact set it before, you know, the last date or a week before, and that'll give you an indication. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Linda can change which reports are recommended here. It's very easy. I'm going to show people how to do that actually tomorrow during the advanced session if I'm still alive. You can also put in your own favorite reports here, and those are reports that you found that are helpful. There's a couple ways of getting them in. One of them is if you know the exact name, and you can find that out when you select them off a different screen, you can type in the name here and put in your own comment. But there's another way of doing it, and that is if you're actually on a report search screen. If we go reports, remember tree view, preview, and report selector hold the same list. They just look a little different. We're going to look at each one of those. If we go to preview here, which I think we've used already, where we did browsing and some other things. If you click on any report that you want to use here, for example, and you say add to favorites and push the button, it will automatically add it to that screen for you and be part of the favorite report. So you don't have to dig through a list of menus to find a report that you need. Does that make sense? So it allows you to take a report that you want to use on a regular basis, and instead of having its location here, it can be on your sign-in screen, so you can get to it fast and easy, and you don't have to remember 10 mouse strokes to get to it, okay? So let's look at the 3 different screens and what they offer. I think we've already looked through the report preview, haven't we? And showed browsing. Have we done that? We haven't? Oh, Lord. Yeah. Remember I said, how do we find calendar reports? You go to, you guys were in the same room, right? Okay. If we go to browse here and we put in, for example, I want to see all the reports that are available for calendar, I click here, I do browse, and it tells me that there's 27, and by using a little arrow through here, I get a preview of what each one of those looks like. I can find one that I need. That works for any of the tables. Most of the people have self-combusted who use callback, but if you wanted to see what reports are available for callback, you can click here, go to callback, you can go browse, and you can see that there are 6, and it shows you printouts for the different callback reports that are available. And we use search as one of the possibilities because you can print out the search screen. Remember, I said you could use the search screen as a mini report writer. Remember when we found all the single parent households? That was a useful thing to do. So this uses all the search, sort, and everything that we've been doing on search screens. What we also have is 2 other screens. They hold the same list of reports. They just give you a different method of finding them. So if you go to the tree view here, you might prefer that. Notice you can add to your favorites here if you want to. You can say I want to find all the reports available under clients. Here's the list. If you click here, it'll show you what the reports look like. You can double click on the report to run it, or you can click on run report and it will actually run the report for you. Are you guys good on that so far? Report Selector is another one that's another way of looking at things here. You can find all of the reports that apply to, there's no previews here, but there are descriptions. So you can look at all eligibility reports, you can look at all callback reports. That's yet another way of finding the report that you want. There's some things here that are cool. PBI, I'm being nice to you guys today. What we're gonna do is if you go to report packs, if you go to report pack B, it gives you a whole bunch of things, graphs of PBI cases closed by county, of PBI cases closed by problem code, a graph of PBI cases opened by county, opened by problem code, graph of PBI cases opened by office, PBI lawyer cases referred in a period. So I'll say enter beginning of time, I'll say 1/1/15, I don't know what date I've got in here. And I'll say enter ending of the start date, I'll say 1/1/18. And when I say okay, this shows me a detailed look at how many cases were referred to each of those lawyers during that period of time. We can, in fact, it's 34 pages long, and we can choke a horse with the amount of reports that we can do. One thing about report writing that I want to mention is that if you use case management correctly, sometimes you'll be very surprised at what you get. There was one thing that I found very important. A lot of you do domestic violence, correct?
Yeah.
What we did, I was just doing this with a client on site, and I said, well, we can run report packs, and you might want to have a hit list of bad conflict people. Who might you want to know about who show up a lot, where you might want to know if they've shown up many times? Well, how about slumlords, right? Or how about used car salesmen? Or, there's a whole group of people you might be interested in. Well, what I did is I went in here and I ran the report on a table of common adverse parties. And what we did is it says adverse shows up at least this many times. And I said, let's say 5 times. And I said, okay, enter problem code. Well, I just said for fun, let's do it for domestic violence. Well, not for fun, but let's do it. And then when we ran it, what I found in actual data is I found the same abuser listed as an adverse party, but it was for 5 different clients. So these guys are serial abusers. I mean, that's true not learning, because I had no idea. You think of one abuser, one, a wife or something, or a partner, but what I found, this could be critical for your representation. If you go into court or something, you could say, Your Honor, we show this person is showing up on 5 other, women in the community that has a history of abuse. This is very cool. This would also allow you to show up slumlords. It allows you to show up any other things in here that you want to look at. You could look at collection companies, all kinds of different things. So that's report packs. There's a whole bunch of them in there. One of the things so those are the tools that you have. Now there's also the report select creator that we're going to look at in a little while. One of the things that we looked at was using the criteria screen, I think. I showed you how we could drop one report into multiple, or criteria into multiple reports, correct? But let's look at that a little bit more in depth. To do that, I kind of like to use FBasic CL1. A lot of people say this does 70 to 90% of what they want. And so if I do start report, here I can preview what it's going to look like. But here I'm going to go in and pick it out. Now this is the criteria screen. And one of the things that you can do is it's a query by form where I can say I want all my female clients, for example, who have a housing problem. I'm going to do a range here. So I'll do problem code. I'll do 60-69. Who perhaps live in Atlanta. So I'm going to do prepare report and produce report. And here's a list of all my female clients who have a landlord-tenant case who live in Atlanta. So if I go to the very end, what you'll see is there's a lot of them. And probably what it'll do is it'll give me a total. But what it'll also do is it'll print out the criteria I used. So if I find this on my desk, I shouldn't have picked that, there's too many of them. 6 months from now, it'll tell me when I generated the report, and what it will also do is it'll tell me why I generated it. It'll say Atlanta for the city, landlord, tenant, and gender will be F. There it is. Select from clients where client's problem code is 60 to 69. where the city is like Atlanta and the female is the gender. And you see there's 2,122 clients who satisfy that condition. Those are known as operators, where you put things in next to the conditions. And let me give you some examples of operators that you can use. You can use null. Null represents blank. So if you wanted to find all these cases that were currently open, where would you put null? Yeah, under date closed, if you put the word null, meaning blank, this would give you a list of the same information, but only those clients who were currently open cases that had not yet been closed. So if I do prepare report and produce report, this is much faster because there's a lot fewer number of them. If I go to the last page here, it's still, when it prepares, does a print prepare on that, it takes a while. So we will have a number of them, and those will be cases that should in fact be, this is showing up as not being closed, or not being null. That's all odd. It should have printed them out where, in fact, the value was null, which means that they were open, still open cases. And I'm showing closed ones in here. So what happened here? And still remembering the old report. Interesting. All right, so what I'm going to do is close this. And I'll close this and go back in. Sometimes it does something called spooling, where it remembers stuff, which is really irritating. So let me go back in here, startup screens. We're going to go to today's screen, and we're going to go back into F-Basic. Some other things that you can do with the system is you can use greater than or equal to, less than or equal to. If you want not equal to, you use the less than, greater than sign. Combined, you put both of those in. You can use between, so you can be between, next to, let's say, date open, between 1/1/16 and 12/31/16 for the year of 2016. You can use wildcards like an asterisk, or you can use a single question mark. So we should be able to go in here under last name and do KE, and then put an asterisk in there. And what we can then do is run it, prepare report, produce report, and it should give me clients whose last name begin with KE, as you can see. All right, so you can use all kinds of different things in there. This is just one report out of over 150 or 200 that work with clients, but it's convenient because it has a whole lot of information in here on the top. Sort order. There's an ability to sort forms or queries. You cannot sort something that begins with an R, which is the large R report. The reason for that is reports that are access objects called reports have sorting built into them already. It's part and parcel, and we'll look at that when we look at the report creator. But that's part of a report itself, so you can't change it. This you can do dynamically. So I can say, I want to sort this, let's say, in order of the client's last name here. So if I click and I do prepare report and produce report, this should now sort by the client's last name. You see that? And so it works that way. But if we try to do that to a report, it wouldn't work. Are there any questions? There is this type of QBF or criteria screen available to report on private attorneys. There's one to report on PBI cases. There's one to report on the eligibility slip. There's one to report on callback. Remember, each of the major tables will have a set of reports, will have a search screen, and will have a criteria screen on here. We already saw the status reports. Remember where we looked at how many bankruptcies you handled during or touched during a period of time, how many you closed, how many you opened, how many you had left. That's another example of a report. Okay. Obviously, you can print these out. One of the things that are possible to do here that's very useful is if you have complex things in here, you can actually save the criteria and play them back by loading them. So if you had a list of parishes that you had to put in, let's say 5 parishes with a bunch of other criteria, you could put them in here. If you have individual things, an individual list. Let's say I want to only look at divorces and landlord-tenant cases. What you could do next to problem code is you could put in 32, comma, 63, and that would give you divorces and landlord-tenant. Prepare and produce, and there you go. What you see are 63s and 32s. See it? So commas represent a list, dashes represent a range of things that you put in. So you could do a range, let's say, if you wanted only housing cases, you could do next to problem code 60-69. If you wanted to find cases open in January, you could do 1/1/18-1/31/18, and it would find all those cases open in January by using a dash.
Do you have to put null in the closed slot to be able to get that?
To get open cases,
Right.
yes.
You always put null.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. I didn't talk about this the other day, but you really have to think about the word open, because it can be used confusingly, okay? If I ask for cases open in January, what I would be doing is I would be looking at the date open and look for all those values from January 1 to January 31st. And those were cases that were opened in that period. There's also the ability to know if those cases were open. Give me a list of all cases that were open at any time or pending in January. So those are pending or active cases. And you can actually search for them in the search screen. If we look at cases, if we go in here, let's go and look for reports. Let's go for preview search. And if I go in here and I look for pending, P-E-N-D, what you'll notice is these are pending cases for a period. Cases pending open on a date. Cases pending between 2 days. Cases pending between 2 dates. And each one of these you can get a preview of and see what it looks like and what it does. There's some that are less fancy, and there's some that are very fancy that will show you, how many were currently, pending between 2 dates, and these will many times show you how many of those have been since closed or still remain open. And so you can get an enormous amount of information by the report writing. So does that make sense? When you're talking, you have to ask yourself, am I talking about cases that were active? It might have been open in 2014, but if they were active, they were pending in that period. Whereas if you're talking about cases opened, then we'd be talking about cases whose date open fell within those dates. Okay? So you just have to be careful during that period of time. So you can, as I indicated earlier, you do have a choice of saving your criteria and playing it back, which makes it very convenient. I don't know if any of you would be doing that, because most people end up doing their reports off the search screens unless they're administrators or something, and then they delve in and really love the QBF and other things in there. So that's something we can look at. You can print it out, HTML, RTF, Excel. It'll go out to all of those. And we talked about saving and loading the criteria. Let's look at that briefly. If I go to my worksheet here and I look at the basic and I do start report, here as you can see, if you can save a criteria, you can see if I want to look at my report in here that I've already used, this is saving, so I wouldn't be doing it here. I would save under a new name, I put in a description, and I can save it either for my own use, or if I want everybody to be able to use it, I could check this and it would save the criteria. But what the criteria actually does is it saves the ingredients. So you can take those ingredients and play them back into any QBF, any report that runs under that criteria screen. So you could take and say, I want a set of letters to these people, or I just want a list of these people, or I want envelopes for these people. So you could take that list of saved criteria. Let me show you how you load it. If you go in here and you pick load, and you see in here senior women clients, I'll click and I'll say load criteria. And what it does is it picks females who are greater than 70 years of age. It's just an example. You could have a whole bunch of things that are in here. What if I want to find single parent households? Remember how we had to do that under the search screen. Very similar here. You don't see adults, do you? You don't see children, but you do see choose other fields. So if I go in here and I say AD, there's adults, and what do I want that to equal? 1. And if I go here and I go for children, CH, now I have a little bit more flexibility. I can say greater than 0. So I do greater than 0. I don't want to do it twice, greater than 0. And then I do prepare a report, and I do produce report. And this will then give me a list of those. Now I've got something else in there. Probably I left my other criteria in there, which is these are single parent households where the female is greater than 70 years of age. Well, she's raising grandchildren, that's right. Yeah. But you see, if you remove these, then you do prepare a report and produce a report, and that's going to open up to the 2,700 we had, or 2,800 that are in there. Is this making sense to everybody? So it gives you an enormous amount of flexibility. Don't think of it just in terms of clients. What I'm doing here with the criteria screen can be done for callback, for eligibility, for PBI lawyers. It can be done for any of the major tables that are in the system. Okay, one of the things that we want to do now is we want to take a look at creating our own reports, okay? And we already talked, let me review one time though. I said that the reports that are in the system usually have their ingredients put in one of 4 ways. Number 1, it uses that criteria screen we saw, or QBF screen, where there's a lot of choices, you put the values in. Number 2, there might be a custom input screen I showed with status, remember? Where we looked at by problem code, how many bankruptcies. That was a separate little screen that wasn't a criteria screen, but it had a couple choices on it. The third way I said was prompts, where it'll say enter the beginning date open, enter the ending date open, enter the office number, and it'll give you the report, but you're kind of limited to what the prompts ask you for, unless you modify the report. And the last method, generally speaking, is where the report just runs, you know, where it's either taking the information from something you're on, or else it's, give me a list of open cases. Well, there's no criteria, it's just, here's the open cases, you see. So certain reports might just run by themselves. Not very common, most of the time you can modify them. Let's say we want to do some custom reports. Is that of some interest to people? There's a couple different ways that we can do that. One is something we've beefed up considerably. It's called the Simple Query Builder. And if we do close here, and close, and let's kind of clean things up, close. Under the menu, under the book, if you go to reports, one of the things that you'll see here is there's a Simple Query Builder here. If we pick reports up here, you'll see that there's a Simple Query Builder here. If you click here, it gives you basically all menu-driven type of situation. Now, I'm going to tell you something, hopefully I'll make sense when I do that. You can do it against a single table or query that exists, or you can, in fact, Linda can set up custom queries for you to run queries against. Well, let me put that in English. Okay? If you do it against a table, you're limited to getting information from that single table. If you look at the client table and you want to find out who the advocate is, what do you think it'll tell you? Think it'll tell you their name? No, it just has their number. If you wanted to get their their name, you would do a query that would join clients to the staff member table by the staff number, and you could get that out. And so Linda could build those base queries for you so you can use multiple tables. I've already put some of those in, but they would see a combination of 2 tables, 2 or more tables. If you look at that, you can see that you can do time and clients, eligibility and clients, callback, difficult people, calendar and clients, and private lawyers and clients. That's just more or less a demonstration of how it can be done. Those queries could be cleaned up and made better. But let's go ahead and take a look at just a simple query that we can build by using a single table. Okay? So we'll go in here, and what table would we most likely be interested in? Clients. Clients. Yeah, that's a table, the client's table. So we pick clients. Once we do that, we're given a list of all of the fields that appear on clients. Now, most of these are easy to understand. This is the case number, I might want that. A case type, I might want that. Problem code, I want that. I might want the staff number here. I'll click. I might want the client's last name. I might want the client's first name. I might want the date opened here. I might want the office number. I might want the funding code. I might want the date closed and the reason closed. So those are the fields that we're actually going to see. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. The next thing we want to do is limit this. So give me 2 limitations.
Date open.
What do you want for date open?
6 months.
First quarter of the year.
How many?
Okay, I'll do it for the year 2016. Okay? I'm not sure of my data, what I've got. So I'm going to pick date open, and I'm going to pick that it's greater than or equal to, and what I'm going to do is put in a value, which is going to be 1/1/16. Hopefully it will give me something in there. Yep. And then I'll pick date opened again, and I want it to be less than or equal to 12/31/16, right? Notice how you have an and here or. We probably want ands there. That it fits between this and that. Let's make sure that this is a value. If it is, so that's good. Now, the next thing, is there another restriction that we want? We want it only for funding code 1, let's say. All right? So we'll pick funding code number 1. So we're going to look at all the cases that were opened in 2016 that are funding code 1, and these are, in fact, the fields we're going to see. How do you want to sort it? When you see them, do you want to see them by date? Do you want to see them by case number? Do you want to see them by last name? Anyone?
Case number.
Okay, so we go down here, order, and I will pick case number. It makes no sense to do anything beyond that because it will automatically, there's only one case number, so you can't say, you're not going to have case number 1, John Jones, case number 1, Susie Smith. There's only one person per case. So we can't do anything else, but we could say, let's sort first by office, let's sort secondly by advocate, and let's sort third by date opened. And that would show you office 1, it would show you advocate 1's cases, and they would be sorted by the first one's date opened, second one date opened, third one, and then it would go to advocate 2, advocate 3, then it would go to the next office, you see? So that's all we have to do. We can run the query. Now, when you run it, you can save it. So I'm going to say save it, and what I'm going to do you see this type your report name here? I had something similar in this before, and you know what a lot of reports were called? They were called type your report name here. Nobody ever put anything in. I don't know. The only thing I could do is show up, and when they pick that, I jump on them and say, be sure to put a name in. So here I'm going to say the name of my report is going to be 2016 off 1. That's probably good. And then I could put in notes about it here. I can say something like cases opened in 2016 for Office 1. Okay? All right, it already ran. I don't know if you saw it, but I'm going to say close here. That saves the name. And you'll notice here it's sorted by case number. It has date, I guess it was date open we used. You'll notice here we've got date open, but we sorted by case number, so that's going to be all over. They're all Office 1. Did we do Office 1 or Funding Code 1?
Funding code.
Oh, that was my mistake. See, nobody jumped, you should have stopped me and said we use funding code. But you see, they're all funding code 1, even though they're different office numbers, and they're all sorted by case number here. And you've got this report. So let's say you want to see this report next week. You come in here and you go, okay, I want to go to Simple Query Builder. I want to choose a existing report. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say I want 2016 Office 1 reports, and I'm going to start the query, and there's the report for you. That was a wow. That was good. That counts as an ooh. We're down to kind of the bare bones number of people here, so I'm willing to accept one person enjoying it.
Could you go back now that that's over there and just put it in alphabetical order by hitting the?
You might be able to do it. I don't know if you'd have the ability to do it by, no, it doesn't, unfortunately it doesn't repopulate that form. You notice? And that, it would be nice if it did that, but it would be a real handful, because what it's actually storing, if you look at it, let's just really quickly build a really quick one. I'm going to choose clients again. I'll just pick a couple little things. Table of query here. I'm going to pick clients. Because what it's storing it is not by filling out this form. It's storing it in what's known as structured query language, or SQL. I'm just going to look for PBI cases here. Okay, makes it real simple. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say case type is equal to P, and so I'm going to pick P for a value here, and I'm going to sort it by the client's. I don't have a client's last name, so I don't have to sort it by anything. I'll sort it by case number here, and if I do run query, what you'll notice here is down here, this is what's being stored. That's the instructions to the computer. So it's not populating that, it's storing that.
But I'm not talking about that. When you got the report, it was up there. Could you go back up to the top part where your ribbon at and hit your search and do that ascend or descend?
I don't know, we could try that.
Yeah,
Good.
let's try that.
See, people a lot of times think of, I'm not gonna save it, there's our report right there. We can test it here. Her question was, can I go in here and like sort by problem code? So if I go to search here and I do A to Z, yeah, of course you can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, why did you say you couldn't?
That was
Jeez,
the other
guy, do I have
report.
to tell you everything?
Yeah, I know. That was the other report when you had the alphabet, so if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
you could have done it there too.
Yeah, that's what I was.
You could have changed it. Good point. See, a lot of times I don't use this on a day-to-day basis. I just make it work. And so people who try it will think of ideas that I haven't thought of. And so, yeah, you can go in there and I could actually point that out to people. You might also be able to do selection in here. So if you went in here and you said, well, I'm only really interested in things that are, let's say divorces or child custody, I could click here,
Yeah.
and I should now go in here and do selection and pick equals 31, and now I've got, out of all the records that were in here, now I've limited that to 95. You see it?
Yeah.
And you can shut off that filter by hitting toggle filter.
I never knew what to really do with that.
No, well, see how I'm down to 95 cases?
Yeah.
If I toggle that, it'll shut that off and it'll takes me back up to how many cases? Takes me back to 868 cases, 65. So, very cool. People understand that? Do you see how powerful it is? And it's even more powerful because of her. No, that was good. Good job. Good job.
Yeah.
I've never trained on it that way before.
Really?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I just hadn't thought about it. And so it does now allow you to further sort that and get better information. And like I said, users a lot of times, I'll probably incorporate that in any trainings I do on that. That's nice. So very good. You guys want to see the super duper supercalifragilisticexpialidocious report writer?
That one.
This is worth the price of admission by itself. Okay. It's called the Report Creator, and it is really pretty awesome. Let's close this and we'll get to it. It's going to be, of course, you can choose it from the tile, or you can, in fact, choose it if you want to from up here. Under Reports, you've got the Report Creator. Now, this will do extremely sophisticated things. One is, you can choose the Report Creator reports by picking an area. We're going to do clients, okay? These are the reports that are already in there. But what this allows you to do is either create new reports if you're an admin and save them. But you'd have to save them in the vault because they're not allowing you to save the master front end stuff And that you'll have to learn about Vault if you come in tomorrow. But what this does is it allows you to do extremely sophisticated reports with breaks and subtotals and everything in it. The best way to do it is you can either start by doing a new report or you can modify an existing one. It's the same prompts. So what I'm going to do is modify an existing one. We're going to run it, you'll see what it looks like, and then what we're going to do is modify it to give you what you need. So, clients closed by office, do you see that? If I run it, watch what happens. It gives me a prompt, starting from office 1, going to office 99, all offices. Day close 1/1/16, I'll do enter. Ending date closed, I'll say 1/1/19. Okay? And I'll say okay. And here's the report, which is really cool. You can actually have it show your logo up here. It's very easy to do. But this shows that for that period of time, the Atlanta office had 3,502 records. In that period, out of those 3,000, John Kemp had 1,357. And as you go through this report, it will show you a breakdown by office. If we go to the very end, hopefully it won't be too long, there it is. What you'll see here is that Tacoma had 198 records, of which 68 were from Terry Demand, Fred had 1, Jeffers had 1. And why isn't this adding up to 198? Because it's repeating at the top of the page. So if I go back up one page, it should show me the rest of them. You see it? There's 68 records. There's 198 records total. If I go back up one more page, it will show that Richard Simmons had 11 of them. So it's just repeating it at the top of each page so that you can see, what we're talking about. Do you understand? All right, here's where the magic occurs. What we're going to do here is we're going to edit this report, and we're going to edit it with a what you see, what you get approach. So if I click under Edit Report here, one of the first things we do is we see what fields are being displayed. What if I want to add an additional field like case type? Well, I can click here on a particular column, and I'll add a column. There's a new column. You see it? If I want to delete the column, which of course I do because I was dumb, I click here, I delete it, I can click next to case number, I can add a column, and it puts it in here and it doesn't split up the last name. What field do we want to see? Let's say I want to see case type. I just pull this down and I pick case type. You see it? Now, I might want to color that case type to make it stand out, so I'm going to change colors. I'll click here and I'll say I want to do that row in yellow. I'll say OK. This will say, do you want to do everything in yellow? I'll say no, and it highlights that color. All right. I can change the fonts, I can change the labels, I can prompt for a new title. I will prompt for a new title. I'm going to say next. Now, we currently break by office number, and then within the report, we break by the staff number. Tell me some other way to do it. You want to break first by funding code? And then within the funding code, you want to see office? And within each office, do you want it broken down by lawyer? Let's do that. We'll do a 3-level break. So our first break is going to be not on office name, but do you want the number or the name of the funding code?
No.
Well, let's do the name because that's harder to do. You can always do the number in your queries and stuff. We've built this so you can use the name, which is pretty cool. So, second level, we were going to do office, right? We'll do office name. And third, we want to use staff, but we don't want to use staff number. Let's use the full staff name, all right? And that's another advantage that we've put together here. So I'm going to pick staff name. We'll go down to the bottom, and here's staff right here. Okay? Now, we want to count the records. We want to repeat the headings. That's fine. We'll go to next. This is where you put in your criteria. You could change it. Notice these are prompting you. You could hard code it in. You could say, I only want to do this for 2016. Or if you put null next to date closed, you could only show open cases and lock it in by taking away that check mark, and it would only give you open cases, okay? And you can have a mixture where it does certain things where it asks you, and other things are hard-coded in. Does that make sense to everybody? I could, in fact, put funding code in here and have it prompt me. And it might ask me, what's the beginning funding code, what's the ending funding code, and I could give a range of funding codes that I wanted to do here. This then asks me within that range, how do I want to sort it? I'm going to do it by client's last name and first name. I'm going to pick next. This talks about printing. You ready? Let's run it. Finish. Okay, starting from Office 1, ending in Office 99, that'll catch them all. Starting from date close, 1/1/16. I'll say OK, and I'll say 1/1/18. And I'll say OK. Enter title for this report. We're going to call it Doug's Push Button. Doug's Push Button. All right. And then we're going to say OK. And there's our report, Doug's Push Button. You'll notice here that contributions has one record from the Atlanta office. It was John Kemp, and it was this case. Whereas fundraising had 3 records, 2 from John Kemp, Terry Demand. IOLTA actually had 654 records total, 654 records, out of which 524 came from Atlanta, out of which Atlanta, John Kemp had 127 of them. Do you see how powerful that is? And how it gives you all kinds, it gives you subtotals on it all, and it gives you all kinds of information. See, if we click in here, you can, this went to the last page, you can see United Way has 9 records, and it shows you 8 of them came from Atlanta. Decatur had 1 record, and these are the people who did them.
Where's your total record?
It's a total record up here for each
You gotta count
funding code.
yourself, there's no grand.
I didn't see a grand total in here. There might be a way to put it in. Oh, incidentally, what's really nice about this, anybody have a Microsoft Access experience? I think you said you did some queries, right? This creates Microsoft reports. So you can actually open up Microsoft and further modify it using Microsoft, changing colors, changing fonts, putting in sums for it, and making it look. So you can make this do all the hard work for you and actually go in and what I'm going to do here, most of you should probably put down your heads and cover your eyes because you probably don't want to see this, but as you can see, there is a Microsoft report that gets created, and you can go in and change it however you want to do it. Change even the record source if you want it. So that is in fact the report creator, and unless you've written a complex report, you have absolutely no idea how much time that saved. I mean, a report like that could have taken 4 hours to write correctly, and we did it in a couple minutes. And you got to realize I was talking about, during that period of time. One of the things I want to show you briefly is the dashboard graphics. What I did is I looked at buying a copy of this and integrating it into my system. It would have been $600 a year per user. So I said, that's not going to happen. So what we did is I wrote it and made it so you could modify it. And what I'm going to do is if you go to Reports and you pick Dashboard Graphics, what you have are 76 different reports in here that produce graphics that can give you an idea about what's happening in your office for a period of time, and you can run them subject to any of these different criteria where appropriate. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of those, which is current open cases. So if I click on open cases, there's always a delay because there it goes. And now what it's going to do is it's going to build graphs showing me what's going on with open cases in my office, okay? Now, this shows me the number of cases that I have in the office by subject area. This shows me the average days each one of those subject areas have been open. This shows me what case types there are in the office, and this shows me how many adults and children we're representing under each of those areas. Would you like to see this one a little bit better? Why don't we just go ahead and enlarge it so it goes full screen, and there you go. That was an ooh, even though you smiled and didn't say anything. All right.
I liked it, I just kept it to myself.
All right, I was internalizing. All right. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we could in fact print out the data also? So if you click here, you can print the data. And there's your data that it's based on. So it's showing you all that important data for that period of time. And so those graphs that have been created, you can also look at the data that was used to create them. This will tell you how that report was generated, usually not too much detail. You can shrink it down again like this. And if in fact you're looking at something like problem codes or something, you can actually go in here, and if you hit information, it will give you a legend for what those things mean. So this isn't very helpful because you could guess what those meanings were, but if you had 99 problem codes in there, it's useful to have a legend that you can in fact use. And I've tried to shrink this down, this box, many times, and it always gets big again on me, so I just give it up. But it's still very useful to be able to pop that legend up to see what all those mean. So if we go back to the table of contents, you get a much better idea of what this holds by looking at all of these different graphs. Some of them are multiple year, which is really pretty cool, and it does an awful lot of stuff. And you can print it and see what's going on. So there's little notes here you should read that explain some of the conditions. That's business intelligence dashboard, or whatever you want to call it. It's basically data visualization, which makes it a lot easier to manage an office looking at that rather than looking at just raw numbers. Okay, why don't we go ahead and take a break, and we have one more session.
That's what I was wondering.
I probably don't have
think it shows
that.
up in errors.
Well, what you could do
'Cause
probably.
I have no errors at all.
Right.
Yeah, what you could do is you could go in and you could do your own custom query
All right.
under primary lawyer and say where it's equal to false.
Okay.
I mean, let's go ahead and try that, okay?
All right.
Where it's equal to what?
False.
Yes.
It's true or
If it
false.
ain't there, yeah.
So if I go here and I go to reports, what we're going to do is a pointed report where she wants to check and see if asked about future income.
So I can check that box for
Yeah,
all of my needs.
if we go reports here and we go to simple query builder here, what table are we looking at? Where's that information? You already told me once.
Eligibility.
Right, it's no, that wasn't a trick question.
I had to think of one.
I know, it's okay.
I had to-
Just don't take too long.
Yeah, I'm slow some days, especially on.
So if we go eligibility here, we've got our eligibility slip. And now we'd probably be interested in the case number. We might be interested in the first name, last name, just to make it easier to find, right? And then last name here. And then what we'd have to do is figure out what the name of the field is. And I would guess it would be, C's usually mean it's calculated. I would guess it's down here. Future income check here.
Okay.
And I'll go
And it
down
doesn't
here.
matter what branch, I need to know it from all, because I may have sent a file to different.
It's fine. I go here to fields, I
Alright.
do future income check, and I'll say it's equal to, let's see if it gives me, 0 is false, this is true, you want it false. Okay? And that's it, you're done. Unless you want to sort it by, let's say, client's last name. Let's do that. And now what I'm going to do is run the query. You want to save it, I'll say no.
Not right now.
Yeah, I'll say no. And there you go, and
Wow.
future income is 0.
So I'll then go back into each one of those to make sure I click that box, that's how I know.
Yeah.
the file.
Yeah.
All right, I hope I don't have that many, but.
Yeah. I do too.
You know, we were having such a problems with it at first, the quirks, and then
Uh-huh.
kind of got.
Well,
lost
see,
in
that
the
would be a
sauce.
perfect example where you go to Linda and you say, Linda, we need a stored procedure in our error alert that will show us that.
Oh, okay.
And that way, I don't have to do
Oh, I
this.
won't have to
It
search.
will,
You'll
it will
just-
show up on my starting screen.
Error.
I could double click, it takes me to the case, I click it, I close it. You know, That would be a perfect example of communicating either to the committee or to Linda directly. That would be useful.
I remember it now, it's just a new box with just put on it.
Yeah.
I was like, when did this thing get here? And I'm like, I
been
missed
there a
it,
long
how many
time.
times have I not seen it? I was wondering when I was kid.
Yeah. Any other questions?
That's fine, thank you.
Yes.
So the blast email, the PBI, in order for them to see it, they have to have their credentials for Prime?
Yeah, they have to have been put into Prime, because it doesn't make any sense, because you couldn't track what they did, you wouldn't know where to send it, you wouldn't have their email, you wouldn't have anything. And so you have to put them in, and once.
But I'm saying if they're in, the lawyers are in, their email, their law firm and everything, if I send them a blast email with the case I have available, do they have to have time to open it up? Or-
No.
No.
It would just be an email to them, they wouldn't have to have Prime at all, no.
Okay,
Yeah, it could go directly to their email.
okay, that's
Yeah.
all right.
So
Yeah, I'm
the
sorry.
PBI portal that we just had installed, or
Uh-huh.
having installed, how does that work? I mean, I know you said there's a video, but
There's video. Yeah, what it does is it allows people to sign up, it allows them to put in their specialties, what types of cases they handle, it allows to say where they're willing, which parishes they're willing to work in.
but
It
they
allows-
have to have to be able to.
No.
No.
No, they log into a website, and it'll show you, James will actually walk you through it, and it'll allow them to say what types of cases, it'll allow them to actually open the case up, they can go in and edit their own cases, they can put in notes, they can upload and download documents, it's really pretty cool. It's done an excellent job. All right, do you all have any other further questions? Hopefully this has been helpful, thank you.
Thank you.